Nestled in a classic New England setting amid 200-year-old elm trees and charming colonial homes, stately sea captains' homes, and charming Cape Cod salt boxes, Shoreway Acres is a graceful blend of Cape Cod's past and present. Shoreway Acres, proud sponsor of Falmouth Community Television.
Hi, I'm Pat Thatcher.
And I'm Margaret Gifford, and we're from Sotheby's International Realty in Falmouth.
So, Margaret, what do we say to people when they ask, should I list my house in the fall or the winter?
The inventory is very low, and your house will be much more apparent.
This is true. And also, remember, buyers are looking 24/7, 365 now.
97% of you are looking on the internet.
So when you have real estate questions,
we're here for you.
Session right away under General Laws, Chapter 21A3, with respect to a discussion of all turbine litigation, as well as collective bargaining update on fire union negotiations. Third issue for executive session is under General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20A6, status and update on potential purchase of Liberty Green project site. And as chair, I declare that to not go into executive session would prejudice the town's position. So I therefore move.
And return to.
Oh, and we will return to open session. Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call.
Patterson, aye.
Moran, aye.
Jones, aye.
Thank you. We'll be back around. Welcome, everyone. We are returning to the open session. This is the Board of Selectmen agenda meeting for March 26, 2018, and we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item we have on the agenda is a proclamation for Eagle Scout Mason Drumming.
So I'll read that today.
Go for it.
So, proclamation, whereas Mason Drummy of Boy Scout 42 has successfully completed the qualifications for the rank of Eagle Scout, a rigorous and demanding process that teaches patience, perseverance, and teamwork, and requires strong goal setting, and whereas Mason Drummy met those challenges with aplomb and shall be recognized as an outstanding representative of his family, his troop, and his community, and whereas the Boy Scouts of America, long acknowledged for building fine citizens, calls for a special court of honor to award its highest symbol of achievement to those who complete this rank. And whereas Mason Drummy is now an Eagle Scout with all its rank and privilege, now therefore we, Susan L. Moran, Megan English Braga, Doug Jones, Samuel H. Patterson, and Douglas C. Brown, as Selectmen of the Town of Falmouth, do hereby declare and proclaim Saturday, April 14th, 2018, as Mason Drummy Day, in witness thereof, the Board of Selectmen. Congratulations. Would you like to tell us about your project?
Second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
My name is Mason Drummy. For my Eagle project, I worked on several trails around the northern end of Long Pond on Brick Kiln Road. The trails had trees falling over and briars and prickers along them that made it very difficult for runners on the cross-country and track teams from the high school, of which I'm a part of. And for my project during the last 2 weeks of August this past summer, we worked on them, clearing them, making them accessible not just for runners but for all the citizens of Falmouth.
Excellent. Good idea. Thanks.
Have you seen them since the storms?
No, I haven't.
You don't want to see them. There must be 50 takedowns. I've just finished walking around it today, and it's a job to get through all of that stuff.
It's for the next Eagle Scout.
But that, I do want to, at the same time, I want to thank you for all of the brushing back of the brush of the stuff on the side, because it does make it a much nicer trail to walk. If we can get those trees cleared, we'll be back in where you left it.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Excellent. Good job.
Big achievement. Thank you.
See you Saturday.
Next, we have on the agenda recognition, Ms. Braga.
Yes, just wanted to recognize really all of the efforts of the staff here at Town Hall in just really implementing, what we're hoping is more communication and community access to what goes on here at Town Hall with boards and committees and the day-to-day running of our government here. So, big thanks to the folks who have compiled and put together and put on the website the information from the live survey. And a big thanks to staff for getting the Selectmen's agenda up and available on Monday afternoon. So that is something that people can take a look at. They can look at the whole packet that we get so that folks have the information in front of them that we have available. So just, we're continuing on that process, and we're just recognizing the importance that transparency and communication has in our community. So thanks to folks, both individuals who are giving us suggestions and those who are implementing them.
Very good recognition. That's quite an accomplishment. Doug?
I also had a recognition of two of our local people from Falmouth who participated in the Paralympics in South Korea. Tony Colaccio and Megan Lino, who are on the curling team there. Tony Colaccio is a coach, and Megan Lino was the alternate, but did make it into the match against Great Britain, one of the few matches that the United States did win. But to have two people from Falmouth representing our country was really quite an achievement. And they're two wonderful, wonderful people that are great to meet and hear their stories about their working for the benefit of both the town and the country.
It is amazing. Fun to watch, too. Next, we have public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone in the audience who might want to speak 2 minutes on a subject that's not on the agenda. Mr. Finneran, welcome.
Thank you, Mark Finneran. I wasn't here last week. I had to help a friend, but I have two things I'd like to comment on. One from the week before, And that being when you reviewed the town manager's contract. I had questions, and they weren't allowed at the time because I believe it was a policy statement or whatever. But what I was going to ask is, does anyone here know how much the governor of Massachusetts is paid? And probably you don't, but the last year they have given us 2016, and he was paid $148,600, I believe. Also in the state of Massachusetts, there's a law that states the governor can't make more than $151,800 a year. And we're paying our town manager upwards to $185,000 and perhaps more. And to me, that seems out of balance, especially in light of the past reviews where they were, under 2 out of a possible 4. I just think that it's excessive. The other thing I'd like to comment on was last week I wasn't here and they gave a review of the progress on the fire hydrants. I first brought this forward in 2011 and 2012, you might remember. It was kind of lively when I brought it up. But we're 7 years later and these hydrants still aren't maintained. We have a system that hasn't been properly flushed, and as near as I can figure in talking with people past and present from the DPW, 23 years, or the water department. I think that, first off, the review we were given wasn't accurate. Basically, these hydrants aren't being taken apart, they're just being painted. I hate to say it, but we're basically just putting lipstick on a pig. I spoke to someone in the water department, and they described it in a different fashion, like putting a new dress on an old, and we'll just leave it at that. I think that we deserve better. And thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay, the next item on the agenda is to vote to affirm the appointment of the health agent. Mr. Suso.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm very pleased to confirm that I've appointed Mr. Scott McGann as the town's health agent, subject to the board's affirmation this evening. I know under separate cover it transmitted some information regarding Mr. McGann's background. He comes to us following a very extensive search process which involved multiple qualified candidates. Scott would be returning to employment with the town, having served, as the board is aware, as assistant health agent for over 10 years prior to leaving for a position in the private sector. Since leaving town employment in 2015, Scott's been employed as Global Foods Safety Support Specialist for the Whole Foods Corporation, overseeing all aspects of food safety for the 70 Whole Foods grocery stores in the Northeast and North Atlantic regions. Scott has a BS in biology from the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, has been a Massachusetts registered sanitarian since 2002. In addition, he's certified as a soil evaluator, a system inspector, meaning Title V, lead determinator, and a certified food service certification trainer. Scott and his family reside in Falmouth, and he is with us here this evening. I'm happy to present him to the board and
Please
have
step up if you don't mind.
Scott join us.
Thrilled to see you. Worked with you many years, many projects. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
And if you could just address the board about, your plans and expectations.
Well, I'm excited, and thanks to Julian and Peter and the Board of Health, and especially Denise. She was great through the process. We're here tonight, so I'm really happy. One of the things is the health agent. Obviously, with the assistant health agent out till August, there's going to be a lot of work to do at the beginning. The one thing I really like to look at is the automation and looking at permits come in, permits come out, and looking at how to organize it better, maybe making it flow a little bit better. A lot of man hours are spent digging through records, looking for things for septic systems and so forth. So I really like to sort of automate that, make it streamlined, so that way it's more efficient. The other next thing I have to obviously do is meet with the board. There's been some change in the 2.5 years that it's about 2.5 years now that I've been gone. And meet the board and see what their expectations are and maybe differences that the board had since I left in 2015. So that's my two main things, and I want to make sure it's as lean and effective as possible. And dealing with the public is something I actually I really do enjoy, Okay, I'm very much out front there, as I've met with Doug or any of you that I've probably dealt with in the past, with permits and so forth. So I'm excited, I really am.
Excellent.
Great, terrific. Anyone else?
I would move approval of the appointment. I've worked with Scott many years, and he's always right on time for his inspections, and he's easy to work with, and I'm glad he's back.
Seconds.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Next, we have on the agenda, under licenses, to approve an application for a special one-day all-alcohol liquor license for the British Beer Company Outdoor Beer and Oyster Festival at 263 Grand Ave on Sunday, May 20th, 2018, and also a one-day Sunday entertainment license for British Beer Company Outdoor Beer and Oyster Festival, 263 Grand Ave, first Sunday, May 20th, 2018. Is there a representative from the applicant?
Yes.
Hi, would you come and introduce yourself, please?
How you doing? Rob Lowen, General Manager of the BBC. How you
Welcome.
doing? Thank you.
And can you tell us a little bit about this event?
So we are trying to plan a one-day outdoor event right on the property to bring local breweries, local fishermen, a bunch of different local folks together to just have an event right out on the property itself. It's a day event. We'll have local bands as well, maybe like a 1 to 6 or a 2 to 6 time frame. I'm trying to bring everybody, local Cape and Island breweries as well, coming out together.
Questions from the board?
I just have one question.
Doug?
This is listed here at the top of our agenda, and down below, under new and recommended, item B, it's the same date and the same venue. Is that just a misprint, or is there something else?
I'm sorry,
New.
which item? Is the second
This is,
mention?
well,
Madam Chair, I
Last one on
can
the
respond to that if you like.
Peter?
Sure, so there's a special, there's a special event license required, and there's an entertainment license required.
oh, and that's the new part?
And, yeah, so that's why the two different
Twice.
pieces.
Okay.
Plus the liquor license.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I don't have.
I'd move approval, and just to reiterate, this is on the private property. This is not going to be over the ball field. This is on.
This will not be at the ball field.
Is it in the parking lot behind?
So the parking lot behind is part of the BBC and the Seaside Inn.
Right.
So it's all one property.
So that's where it'll be?
So it'll be right back there. There will be no cars on the premises for the day. And all the vendors and the bands and so on and so forth will be there with gated entrances for the participants. It'll be like a wristband type of event. Sell
So-
tickets ahead of time.
What will they do for parking? Go down to the beach?
She'll either do beach or we'll do street parking,
Okay.
which is what we do for Lennon Fest.
Great, so is there a motion? and
We had a second, we just had to.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Congrats,
time.
great idea.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Next, we have on the agenda to approve an application for livery limo license, Never Rest Limo Van Service LLC, 38 Village Common Drive. Is the applicant in the room? Hi, please step up.
Good evening. Caleb Rostron. I'm a resident of Falmouth. I'm the owner-operator of Never Rest Limo Van Services LLC, and my wife Marilyn is the owner-manager. It's a member-run LLC, just the two of us, single vehicle. And you each should have received a packet that kind of outlined,
We did.
and just so that you know,
Green Shuttle.
this binder contains all of 2017's information, including runs, all of the bills that I paid, the maintenance on the vehicle, Easy Pass, everything. So it's a small operation. And if you have any questions, please feel free. Oh, I do want to make one comment, though, before we do that.
Sure.
One of my 3s must have looked like an 8. It's 33 Village Common Drive, not 38, as it is on
Okay.
the agenda.
Okay. That's helpful, thank you. Any questions from the board?
I had one
Doug?
question. A number of times in the documentation we received, it talks about go green. It's easy going green. Certainly there's an implication that there is an environmentally friendly aspect of that company.
Yes, sir.
Is it, but I couldn't find anything that actually backed that up as to what was environmentally friendly about the Green Shuttle Company.
Green Shuttle is a company out of Pocasset, and they are my only client. And my only job is moving their clients from point A to point B. The owner of the company looked at the livery business and decided that there's got to be a better way than big town cars. He's invested very heavily in hybrid vehicles. And when Marilyn and I went out to form our LLC and look for our vehicle, the one requirement he gave me was that it be able to burn the E85 flex fuel. Now, unfortunately, that being said, you can't find it. But if I can ever find it, I can use it. And that's the green component. I get very decent gas mileage. I keep it tuned. I keep it maintained on a real regular basis. So I'm doing my best to follow the Green Shuttle motto.
Thank you.
That was my question.
Sam?
I have a question. I didn't see anything in here. Are you required to have a QUARI, a criminal offense record?
That should have been submitted with the packet.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Doug?
No, I think it was a very thorough presentation that we had in our packet, so I think most of my questions were answered. I only was curious that if it needed to be, the owner of the company live in Falmouth that originates the business, but I don't see any reason for it. They can work as a subcontractor, as far as I can tell.
Makes sense.
Right.
Is there a motion?
I would move approval of this application.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Very nice presentation.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have under
Good luck.
administrative orders, to vote to approve an easement to the town of Falmouth from the Falmouth Board Sailing and Beach Club, Inc. to facilitate reconstruction for Salt Pond Inlet on Surf Drive. Mr. Suso.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is a straightforward matter that we needed to be granted this easement to move forward with a planned maintenance activity. I don't know whether, I see our Deputy Public Works Director, Peter McConerty, with us. Peter, I don't know if you have any information on this particular easement and how that would be utilized?
Good evening, Peter McConerty, Deputy Director of Public Works. Yes, this is the Salt Pond outlet that goes from Surf Drive out to Vineyard Sound. Over the years, Public Works equipment to clean out that inlet of that area. It's about 120, 150 feet long. We always did it from the east side. On the east side, anyone that's driven by that area, there's a structure, a wooden structure frame with the piers and the piles in the ground. It's very hard for our equipment to access and get around that. So what we're looking at doing is rebuilding that groin, basically the same as it was the one that was built over at Trunk River with the solid bottom. But to clean it out, we're going to do it from the west side. And in order to do it from the west side, we needed to get a permanent easement from the Board Sailing Club to be able to get in there and access our equipment to be able to go out and clear out the sediment.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
It's
Is there a
answered it right
motion?
there.
I move to approve the easement for the town of Falmouth from the Falmouth Board Sailing and Beach Club.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Suso. Next, we have a vote to retroactively approve a transmittal of a letter to Cape Cod Commission in support of EDIC related to Tech Park. So I'm the vice chair of the EDIC. There was some research done on behalf of the EDIC by our council, and the research included some investigation with the Cape Cod Commission and some advice. There was a general feeling among the board that since the agreement really hadn't been used in about 10 years reportedly, there may not be a reason to extend the agreement. And there was a suggestion to do more investigation, to actually ask the folks at the tech park to be sure whether or not they had any interest in extending this agreement. It was a very short window that their comments had to come forward. They were very responsive, which the board appreciated. And so the timeline, very short. The commission had an opening for a hearing to extend for 3 years, just in case the residents of the tech park want to make use of this agreement. At the same time, the Cape Cod Commission is already revamping a lot of its rules, really geared more toward more local control with the towns. And so this will give a transition period for those new processes and procedures to come into effect so that the tech park folks can decide whether that might be more advantageous or whether to keep this agreement. So just apologies to the board that the timeline was such that we had to move on this quickly. So this request is really for a ratification of an action. Mr. Suso, did I not include anything?
I think
that
you
should
covered
be?
it well, Madam Chair.
Okay,
And as you said, it's to extend the agreement for 3 years.
correct.
And I move approval of the letter that's already been sent.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for drafting.
Great. Next, we have a vote to authorize an expenditure from Conservation Commission donation account for municipal vulnerability program expenses not to exceed $1,800. I see Ms. Lowell's name is on the email, and I think I saw her walk. Yes. Would you mind giving us some background? And Mr. Suso, did you have a comment here?
Well, yeah, except, Madam Chair, this donation account relates to the Saturday event that we had, the workshop, actually with the Coastal Resiliency Committee.
Okay.
Amy Lowell's item is the next item.
Okay,
Herring- on
sorry,
Herring Brook.
I got it. I got ahead.
Yeah,
I got
that's
ahead.
what- she can stay
Jen,
up
do you
front.
want to come up? Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Hi, Jen McKay, Conservation Administrator. So this weekend, the Coastal Resiliency Action Committee sponsored a workshop. It was the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Workshop. The workshop, the town had applied for a grant through Coastal Zone Management to go through this process. We had the workshop on Saturday. It was held at the Seacrest. This expenditure is for the luncheon that was supplied to our participants. It was well attended. There were a lot of great ideas that came out of the discussions, and the Coastal Resiliency Action Committee will be following up that workshop on May 8th with a listening session, so more of the general public can comment and get an idea of the discussion that was had.
Was the space donated?
The space was donated by the Seacrest, yes.
And so this is just for the...
It was just for the luncheon, yes.
Doug Brown, did you have a comment?
I thought it was well done and a legitimate expense.
Anyone else?
I'd move to authorize the expenditure.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
No.
Okay, now it's Amy. Great. This is to authorize the grant application to fund Herring Brook study.
Hi,
Welcome.
thank you. I'm Amy Lowell. I'm the town's wastewater superintendent. This is a request for permission from the board to apply for a grant. Even though the funds, for grants, even though the funds come from elsewhere, there's a requirement that that entities request the selectmen's support for a grant application. So this specifically is to fund basically the first portion of a water quality study for Herring Brook. Herring Brook is the waterway, small water body that flows under the bridge and between the two portions of Old Silver Beach, just to tell you where we are. So it's basically between the two portions of Old Silver Beach. And the town of Falmouth and the Buzzards Bay Coalition collaborated last fall to apply for a Community Preservation Committee, or Community Preservation Act funding for a study of this watershed. And that was not funded by the Community Preservation Committee. And we will be coming back, our plan is now to come back in the fall to request a town meeting article to fund that study. But the Buzzards Bay Coalition, Corin Peterson with the Buzzards Bay Coalition is here if any questions come up. They identified a grant that could help support this work and reduce the amount of funding required at a later date. So they had suggested that we apply collaboratively for this grant. And the water quality study is really because Herring Brook was listed as one of the water bodies that requires a total maximum daily load assessment, and it has not yet had the water quality studies that back that up. So this is really to help the town make progress toward that
For
goal.
nitrogen loading.
Right, exactly, for nitrogen loading. So this grant would provide about $35,000 and would therefore reduce the amount that we'd be requesting at a later date. And the arrangement is expected to be a cost share between the Buzzards Bay Coalition and the town. So the amount that we would ask for at a later date, we believe right now would be, it's $85,000 total, of which we'd ask the town meeting for half of that, and the other half to be supplied by the Buzzards Bay Coalition.
I would move to authorize the grant application to proceed forward.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
With
Nice
thanks to the
see you.
Buzzards Bay Coalition for collaboration.
Indeed.
Great, we're going to skip ahead. We do have a posted hearing on a wetlands dock hearing for James and Erica Milligan, 59 Charles River Road, East Falmouth, Charles River. I just have to find the notice. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm going to read the public hearing notice. The Falmouth Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing under Section 24077, which is the wetland regulations of the zoning bylaws of the Town of Falmouth on Monday, March 26, 2018, at 7:30 p.m. in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, Falmouth Town Hall, on the application of James and Erica Milligan for permission to construct and maintain a 5-foot 5 by 17-foot pier extension, a 4-foot by 15-foot T, and install an outpiling to the existing private residential pier system under license number 14116, located at 59 Charles River Road, East Falmouth, Mass. The area affected is Charles River. Interested parties may review the file on this hearing at the Selectmen's office per order of the Board of Selectmen. The publication dates for Friday, March 16, 2018, and Friday, March 23, 2018, Falmouth Enterprise, with a copy to the abutters. Welcome.
Welcome, Madam Chair. Thank you. For the record, my name is Kevin Clower. I'm an attorney with Ahmet Clower Law Firm here in Falmouth, and I represent the applicants James Milligan Jr. and Erica Milligan. I'd like to begin by thanking the board for taking this matter under reconsideration. As you will recall, this was heard on February 12th of this year, at which time it was approved with certain conditions, which we came back and asked the board to reconsider, and you were kind enough to do. The first of those restrictions and conditions that we wanted to discuss was the restriction of the dock to the use of only one boat. This dock ends in an L shape, which is a length of 20 feet, 5 inches. The applicant's boat is 40 feet. The applicant's boat will make use of the entirety of the dock. However, there will be the occasional dinghy or tender that is used by both children and visitors, and we wouldn't want to run afoul of the permit. So the preference would be to eliminate that restriction. However, short of that, would be willing to have some language just specifying that temporary usage of a smaller boat or dinghy or tender wouldn't be a violation. The second issue was the outpiling, which was shown on the plan. There's an outpiling shown approximately 11 feet from the end of the dock. That outpiling is there for the specific purpose of docking the applicant's boat. The T is undersized. As I mentioned, it's only 20.5 feet, and the applicant's boat is 40 feet. The tie-off to that outpiling is integral to the design. The applicant could have proposed a larger T, but didn't in order to minimize the impact on the area. But with the smaller T, the outpiling is required. So those are really the two issues that we wanted to come back and discuss with you this evening. And I'd be happy to address any other questions you might have at this time.
Before we get to that, because I think you might have some questions by the board in this regard, I'm not sure whether you received a copy of additional comment. This is from an abutter, it's a person, a seasonal property at 53 Charles River Road in East Falmouth, and it's Patricia Saturnow. It was Jay and Patty Saturnow. And I'm just going to read the concern just so you can bear it in mind. So the redesign of the Milligan's Pier from the original design we received in July 2017 has it extending into Charles River by 17 feet. We're worried that this extension will impede our ability to undock and dock our boat safely due to the existence of a mooring within close distance to our dock, which then holds a sailboat each summer. Every summer, it seems this sailboat swings closer and closer to our boat, but we have not expressed a concern due to our ability to exit the dock straight ahead into the river. We're now concerned that the 17-foot extension of the pier at 59 Charles River could jeopardize this without at least moving the mooring. And the request is for us to take this into consideration to ensure the safe use of our existing dock, should the construction of the pier extension be granted. And as you know, the safe passage is within the purview of the Board of Selectmen. So I just I didn't know if you'd had a copy of that?
I have.
We just received it today.
I had not been given a copy of that. It doesn't, I'm trying to follow the concern, and it doesn't sound as though the concern is with any mooring from the applicant's dock, or it sounds to me like the concern is from a mooring from an adjacent, with an adjacent mooring?
Well, it talks, let's see, every summer, this is the tough thing when folks aren't able to appear. Doug, you've read this letter. Do you have a better understanding?
My reading of it is that there was a mooring on your client's property that has a sailboat attached to it. Is there? And I thought there was a mooring.
No, he doesn't have he doesn't have a mooring associated with his property with a sailboat.
Could I ask a question?
Sure, Doug.
Could you describe to us how the sailboat is tied up previous or currently?
It's not the applicant's sailboat, and I don't believe it sounds to me like it sounds to me, based on the letter, as though the mooring for that sailboat is off of someone else's property.
Well, then I guess the concern would be with the extension that maybe closes the distance between the mooring and the sailboat and the dock. So I guess that would be the concern.
So the mooring, I'm sorry, the dock was pushed out the additional 17 feet, as we discussed at the last hearing, in order to make sure that the boat was drafting an appropriate amount of water. The applicant's boat was drafting an appropriate amount of water. So that puts him in about 4 feet of water at the proposed length.
When is the change up to 4 feet? How far out?
Well, it looks as though we're at 3.7, 3.74, 3.7, and beyond that, on the other side of the dock is 3.2, 3.3, 3.1 on the interior side.
So at what number of feet of the extension does
17.
It
At the end is where it shows, because the readings before that are 3.2 and 3.3.
That's my question. Thank you. Doug?
Maybe the same question Doug was asking, but what's the current configuration of the dock and the boat, and how does it fit there?
Matt Costa, Cape and Islands Engineering. Right now, the applicant docks his boat right alongside of the dock this way, pulls it in bow first. When we went to the commission to rebuild this dock, we originally didn't propose to extend it further out into the waterway. We were encouraged to do that, and we did. And the purpose was to move that boat out into deeper water and to realign it so it's parallel with shore so that the entire boat stayed in deeper water. At that time, this specific layout was reviewed by the harbor master. We did note a mooring about 46 feet to the southwest. That's your closest mooring there. And if that was to be a problem, the harbor master would address that. And the applicant absolutely wants to work with his neighbors and be a good neighbor. So he would, in any situation where there was an issue there, he would work with the neighbors.
The harbor master also does ask that the piling be removed from, is he talking about the new piling or an old piling?
He made reference to the out piling
Right.
over here. We Specifically, we're allowed a 100 square foot tee. We want less than that to minimize impact, and added the outpiling for the length of the boat. So that was actually integral to the design. I don't know if he necessarily knew that. He made a suggestion to have it removed. We don't want it removed. It is part of that design. So it was approved that way. The commission did approve it.
Because it was not in
We
their,
still have to approve it.
it was not in their findings, anything about it, and so we have nothing to go on of their findings saying it was not a problem. All we have in our documentation is from the harbor master asking us to eliminate it.
He didn't ask you to eliminate.
Recommendation, eliminate the tie-off piling 11 feet south of Dock L.
I believe he suggested it, but it was part of the design. And we could come up with a larger tee, but that's just more impact.
So the recommendation of the harbor master being to eliminate the tee.
The outpiling.
The outpiling, sorry, misspoke. If the board were to decide that was part of the condition of this approval, what would you suggest as a alternative to the problem that you're trying to
We would need to go back and redesign the dock, because this dock wouldn't work, does not work without that outpiling.
You're indicating that's not going to secure the boat without the outpiling.
Exactly.
Correct, the outpiling is part of.
Yeah, the outpiling is only, the length of the tee is only 20 feet 7 inches. It's a 40-foot boat. So rather than pulling the boat in towards the land, at the suggestion of the Conservation Commission, it was designed in order to go parallel to the shore to keep the boat in deeper water. But without that outpiling, they can't do that. The math just isn't there.
So it seems that if a 40-foot boat were attached to this pier previously, only a portion of it, probably the rear portion, would be accessible to the dock, and the rest would have had to been attached to an outpiling or a mooring.
Well, they pulled, Mr. Costa was saying they would pull the boat and bow first alongside the length of the dock. So it would be tied up along the length of the dock.
This entire area right here.
And that was long enough to facilitate pulling in bow forward, huh?
No, it wasn't really long enough. That's why we're
That's why.
redesigning it.
Okay, but in the
Over 7
comment
extra feet.
from the next door neighbor, it said that the sailboat swings seemingly ever closer to their mooring. I'm not
But the
clear
sailboat's
as to-
not
I think
ours.
it's a different neighbor, I think what they're raising the issue that a different neighbor's sailboat is swinging, and so they're concerned that the space between the two won't be wide enough. It's not the Milligan sailboat, it's, I think, a neighbor's, and they're just saying that now with that extension, will that space be too narrow?
Yeah, and it's for the neighbor's boat. They're concerned about
To get-
ability to get out. Do you have a locus?
Actually, Jay Milligan, the applicant, is here with us tonight, and he just informed me that he thinks he understands the mooring that they're talking about, and that mooring seems to slide around a little bit over the years. So that seemingly getting closer might be actually the mooring moving around. So they aren't fixed permanently, so we could have that relocated a safe distance away to make sure it's not a problem.
Do you have a locus that shows the adjacent properties?
This is the plan right here.
Yeah.
The locus map up top was just to
That's
key
it.
you in. I called out the distances, what we're required to do to the closest moorings from the area where we're docking the dock. So I'm not 100% sure which one they're talking about, but the closest one right here is 46 feet away, so it's probably that one.
Well, they identified themselves as the next door neighbor at 59, I believe.
59, right?
Right.
They are 53, you're 59.
Okay, excuse me.
You want, can I?
Sure.
James,
I mean, excuse me.
Challenger Road. Maybe I could just clarify this for everybody instead of everyone guessing.
Please use the microphone.
If you need, take the mic with me. This is my residence here. The Saturn hours are here.
Okay.
The mooring is over here.
The Saturn House more?
No, the Saturn hours dock is,
They have
would
a
be
dock.
up in here somewhere. It's closer to the shoreline. But the mooring they're referring to is off their property. And when I bought the house 3-4 years ago, that mooring has steadily creeped
So now, the way it's positioned presently is, you know, the Saturnaus can get out this way or come through my dock, and there's water there. This sailboat, depending upon which way the tide is swinging, will either prevent him from going this way or that way, because that sailboat, when I bought the house, the sailboat was way up here. And so every year, it's slipping more towards, across the Saturnau's property and into my property. So that, you know, what the Saturnau's were talking about is readjusting the mooring so it doesn't interfere with his 20-foot boat getting out of there, because I don't want to restrict him in any way. But that mooring is slipping down. The mooring needs to be moved back to its original position when I bought the house 3-4 years ago. It's clearly not in the same position.
Doug?
But part of the issue also is that your current arrangement is you're coming, so south, right now you currently come in the south part of your dock, right? That's where you currently come in.
I come in here.
Right.
Bow in.
The new plan is to be going way closer to the Saturnau's water, because your bow is now going to be sticking out past the dock to the north a little bit.
Negative, sir. So the plan is my bow is coming off that.
Fine, and then your stern's going to be...
My stern will be level with my dock now, and the bow is coming out over here. To tie off the bow, to secure the bow to that, because the way the cleat's set up on my boat, I'm not going to get a line here, all the way over here, and secure that in that tide. It's not going to happen. And so that's why the outpiling is necessary, so I can get a bow cleat off that piling. So my engines are level with my end dock. And then my kid's Zodiac was right here anyway, so they could still get out even with my kid's little Zodiac that they put around and go tubing on. So there's room there. It's just that sailboat is slipping.
And the Zodiac is going to be tied there all the time?
Zodiac, subject to your approval, of course, the Zodiac is going to be on the inside here. It's never going to be, it's not going back over there. It's going to go on the inside right here.
Your lawyer said that this was on a rare occasion there'd be another boat there.
The Zodiac is on a trailer?
Oops. You just speak to the mic, sorry.
The Zodiac is on the trailer. So that's not constantly in the water. The kids use it to go tubing in the bay. So if it's a matter of it being permanent there, I can take it out in the weeks, drop it in on the weekends when they want to use it. And they use it sporadically, which is a concern because I don't even know why I bought it. But it's there. If it's a matter of there being permanently, I can take it out of the water during the week. We're only down on the weekends for the most part. My wife's there the whole summer.
Any other questions? Is there anyone in the audience that wants to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience that wants to speak against this application? Sam?
In trying to sort this out in my own mind, it seems like what we're getting is really a recommendation of the Conservation Commission to get that boat out further so it doesn't bottom out and impact the bottom-growing creatures and plants. And so I understand when you have a 40-foot boat, you can't just tie up to a 20-foot dock or floating dock and be able to secure it in wind and tide. So it only makes sense to have a piling out there to give you a secure mooring for your boat. So and it seems like the piling is actually on the opposite side of this proposed dock from this complaint, from this abutter.
Yes.
So I don't see the connection, and I'm sort of sympathetic to the design that the civil engineers have provided to provide a secure mooring for this gentleman's property.
Are we ready to close
I would move
the hearing? Is that what you?
I was going to move to close the hearing if
Second.
there was any.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Discussion?
Just, along Sam's line of thought, I think, a piling that's sort of out and leave space in between is less, less of an obstruction than if they go back and they redo it and they make the dock long enough that they can tie up at it completely. So, there's math here and it's just the physics of what you need to have happen. So, if it were something that I think conservation were really concerned about, or if the harbor master, I know he recommended it, but I think that it is going to require a complete redo of that design, and I'm not sure that the cost benefit, really, to me, it just seems like this is a decent solution for the problem.
I'm not sure I understand the harbor master's reticence, because as explained very well by the homeowner and engineering council, I see that those considerations were given, good weight, and it seemed like there was a good compromise that was made, and there's further indication of, a willingness to work with the neighbors and help move the mooring or whatever's needed with respect to the one issue that came up. Doug?
I agree. I think this plan makes sense. I would like to just check with the harbor master and see if there's something we're missing, but this seems to be the most sensible approach. The dock now is at the edge of the lot line. This moves it more to the center of the property and seems to be an effective solution. The one thing I would also like to check with the harbor master is whether or not we can ensure that we can move that mooring and get it into the correct place so that we're not encroaching on the neighbor's ability to come and go.
I hate to have these folks wait. We've already had a second hearing, and it seems that the best evidence at this hearing is what we should be deciding on, from my view. Megan and then Sam?
Well, I think the mooring that has the sailboat, the problematic mooring, I think is a different issue. We can bring it to the harbor master's attention. I don't think it really, frankly, doesn't actually have anything to do with approval of this project. I think it's important that we have received the information that it's maybe moving in a way that's problematic. Right. I think we can address that. And again, I think if the harbor master was really adamant and concerned about this, he probably would be here tonight making sure that we know that he needed this removed. My guess is he probably looked at this, maybe didn't have the information that was required for that particular design, and said if it's a residual piling that's just sticking out there, it probably should be removed. So I would, unless Sam, I didn't know if you want to make.
Yeah, is the harbor master not, isn't it his jurisdiction to determine where moorings can be placed?
Oh, on the mooring, yeah.
The mooring for this sailboat that seems to be creeping on its mooring. It seems to me it's up to the harbor master to resurvey this, take a look at where all the moorings are. I know they move these moorings around to try to accommodate more buck boats on more moorings of longer lengths. And maybe that's what's been happening, that they deliberately have moved this mooring, but I don't think that should deny the rights of this particular homeowner with his boat. So I think it's a challenge for the harbor master to work out the mooring locations to make sure that there's navigable water.
Okay,
I agree with your previous comment that the letter we received with that mooring has nothing to do with this application.
Right.
That's a different issue, and I have no problem with requesting that the harbor master look into that mooring, and I don't this interferes with this plan. I guess if the harbor master had a recommendation and didn't want the outpiling, he would say, my recommendation is remove the outpiling. And that's exactly what he said. There's nothing else he really could do. I think he knows harbors, he knows waterways. And my belief, we don't have him saying this, is that to have an outpiling sitting 11 feet away from the dock, when the boat there isn't a problem. When there's no boat there and you have an outpiling just sitting 11 feet away from the dock, could be a hazard. And that could be what he's concerned about, is that 11 feet's pretty far. If the bow is going to get to that 11 feet and the engine's at the end, I could see it being sufficient for it to be a good deal closer. You don't necessarily have to threaten that you're going to have to make this dock 11 feet longer. You might be able to get away with not having the outpiling quite so far away. But I am really leaning towards wanting to go with what the harbor master's recommended. He is our professional in dealing with the waterways. And we have no findings from the Conservation Commission that they took this into consideration. Usually they do mention in their findings what they talked about, and the findings aren't included about this issue at all.
Doug?
I think Megan made a good point, though, that we approved this previously. We didn't hear any feedback or any indication prior to this meeting that the harbor master reiterated his concern. So maybe it was just a misunderstanding on his part that it was an old piling.
Is there anyone who feels they're in a position to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I was going to suggest if it would be the pleasure of the board, we can attempt to reach out to Representative the Harbor Master yet this evening during the continuation of your meeting, see if we can get that clarified, or the board may just wish to act in the meantime.
And so what would be the process? We
You've
would
closed the
continue.
hearing, so we could
Table it.
Just table
table
it?
it temporarily, maybe for an hour or so, maybe less.
Okay, would anyone?
I move that we table a hearing, to hopefully get some feedback from the harbor master on this particular application.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
If we could just have a, maybe a time limit so folks aren't here. I mean, he has an attorney here.
Why
that
don't we
he's
say
paying
9
for.
o'clock?
That sounds reasonable.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
do you make that part of the motion?
I would make that, so it's time definite, to 9 o'clock,
Okay.
or
Great.
earlier.
All right, we're going to put you on ice. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to authorize a letter to Eversource in opposition to herbicide spraying for vegetation management. The board has done such a letter in years past. Mr. Suso, I don't know, do you want to give some background on this?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. You may recall that we have, each year for the past several years, been contacted by an organization that champions the opposition to Eversource spraying of herbicides and potentially toxic chemicals for vegetation control in the utility rights-of-way. And the board in the past has taken action to advise the state against allowing such activity to go forward, given the towns and the entire Cape being on a single source aquifer. And if anything, I think the town's recent commitment to and construction of the $46.5 million water filtration plant's an indication about the community's collective resolve about clean water in the town of Falmouth. There is a draft letter, if the board concurs, once again notifying the state of the Selectmen's concern for spraying for vegetation control by Eversource.
Any thoughts?
I would move approval. I don't think it hurts at all to voice our concern. It's unfortunate that it goes on and on year after year, despite the concerns of many towns on the Cape, in spite of lawsuits and so forth. I think Barnstable's recently had some success, actually, in delaying their implementation. I don't know if ultimately they'll be successful, but I would urge you to at least send a letter.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, thank you. Next, we have on the agenda to authorize a letter of support for the Cape Cod Commission in seeking mass housing funding for a regional housing preference survey. Is anyone here from the commission, or Mr. Suso?
I don't think we have a representative, Madam Chair, but we were contacted by Commission staff member Heather Harper, former Assistant Town Manager, asking if the Town of Falmouth would be interested in supporting that initiative, and if so, that the interests of the Town of Falmouth would be included in that process, subject, of course, to the concurrence of the board this evening, with a letter of support.
I would move to authorize a letter of support for the Cape Cod Commission.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just curious, who's calling the Marine Services? Is that
I have a text into him.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a motion to retroactively authorize transmittal of an application to the State Department of Housing and Economic Development to establish one or more opportunity zones in Falmouth. Mr. Suso, this was a tremendous effort on your part. I wonder if you could tee that up.
Certainly, Madam Chair. The board may be aware there was some recent activity making available the concept of opportunity zones in the Commonwealth. It's based on a federal designation as well, by my recollection. There are a limited number of census tracts in the Commonwealth in which an opportunity zone could be declared, which is for the purpose of encouraging some financial investment in potential development in certain areas. The concept was presented recently to the EDIC, and my understanding, although I had to leave the meeting early to deal with an issue which arose, my understanding was that the EDIC expressed an interest in exploring that. The one census tract identified is in East Falmouth, and there is an adjacent tract both in East Falmouth and the Wacoit area that conceivably could qualify for an opportunity zone. And it was suggested by EDIC, encouraged that the town consider applying for it. I will also note that I was advised it was also discussed by the planning board in general terms at their recent meeting, and for reasons I'm not fully apprised of, they were less enthused about pursuing it. But to err on the side of caution in talking with Madam Chair, we felt it would be appropriate to, because there is a deadline, the deadline is today. It was extended actually from last Friday to today, or may have actually been last Thursday to today, given the recent winter storm, to attempt to qualify as an opportunity zone. So I did file the necessary online paperwork with the state, subject to the concurrence of the board, if you desire that to go forward. And as you can imagine, normally we'd prefer not to do that retroactively, but the deadline presented to us did not allow a good alternative.
And this is something that Senator DiMacedo's office brought to our attention through legislative aide. Troy Clarkson made a presentation to EDIC, and the it was one of those things that there really is no downside. If you don't apply through this application, you don't get in the lottery, so to speak. You don't get considered. So there is still time to look at whether the opportunity would be right. But if we hadn't, kind of reserved a spot, we wouldn't have the opportunity to really look at that.
Correct.
Sam?
Yeah, what's the purpose of this opportunity zone?
It's essentially a tax credit formula that developers use to, bring, it attracts them to a certain area, and it would be East Falmouth, Wacoit.
For what development?
In this case, is it a workforce housing element?
Well, it can be for commercial or industrial type uses, more so than housing specifically, is my understanding.
So more jobs than housing.
So it would have a potential job creation element for certain limited areas. There is no guarantee, because there are a number of potential locations in the Commonwealth, and many more potential locations than they're actually able to designate under the federal guidelines, so it's a very competitive process as well.
Doug?
I would just take a guess, not that I know, but I suspect the only reason the planning board might have been a little hesitant was they're right now reaching out to East Falmouth Village Association in an attempt to come up with some comprehensive zoning for that area, because they feel it's ripe for redevelopment, and maybe they're afraid that this might put the cart ahead of the horse. But it still sounds like a good idea to me, so I'm in favor of it.
I'd move approval. I think all it does at this point is give us a bite at the apple. It doesn't lock us into any specific plan. It just leaves an opportunity open to us. So I don't see the harm in going forward and at least having that as a potential option if we were even to be fortunate enough to
win.
Second. Exactly.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great.
Madam Chair, could I take a moment to update something I overlooked, just for the record? On the recent the Herringbrook study that Amy Lowell and Corin Peterson were speaking about, and were here present, I wanted to just confirm for the board that that was also transmitted to the subcommittee, the Finance Committee, to take a look at, and we received a positive recommendation on that. I neglected to so indicate, but I know that's our standard protocol here with the board, and I'd be remiss if I did not confirm that. Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right, next on the agenda, we have special events, starting with the recurring recommended. The first one being Daffodil Days at Spore Gardens, Fells Road closure for Saturdays, April 21st, and April 28th. I'll read through, and if anyone wants to hold them,
Sure.
please do. The next one, Woods Hole May Festival, Woods Hole Community Association, Taft Playground and Ballpark for Saturday, May 26, 2018. Next is the Butterfly Garden Day, Sport Gardens Fells Road closure on Saturday, July 29. Next is the Falmouth Farmers Market at Marina Park, Thursdays from May 24th through October 11th, and then one final date of November 20th, 2018.
Could I have a hold for that just for 1 second?
Sure. Next is the Falmouth Art Market, Falmouth Cultural Council at Marina Park Bandshell Side, Thursdays, June 7th to August 30th. Next is the Sunday Worship at John Wesley United Methodist Church, Surf Drive Beach and Parking Lot, Sundays from July 1st to September 2nd, except for July 15th and August 19th. And finally, on the recurring recommended is the Falmouth 4th of July fireworks already at Falmouth Heights Beach and Ball Field, Wednesday, July 4th, 2018. I notice there's no rain date.
It says on here.
There
Does
is.
it?
There
On
is.
the application.
Does it on there?
Yep,
Okay.
July 5th.
July 5th, good
I
to
move
know.
items A through C and E through G.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Doug, on
Just a
the
question.
farmer's market?
Yeah, the fee is $2,100. Didn't we do it for less?
This
in
is
the
just
past?
approving them, we're not talking fee yet, right?
Yeah,
Right.
not waiving the fees yet.
That's coming up.
Okay, excuse me.
To be due.
In that case, do you want to make a motion on that particular item that you held?
Move approval on that item? The one that
Yeah,
we held?
I move approval, yes, definitely.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, next we have new events recommended, Cape Cod Classic, a cycle classic for Habitat for Humanity from the canal to Shining Sea Bike Path to the canal on Sunday, September 23rd, 2018. And we have the Outdoor Beer and Oyster Festival at British Beer Company that we just heard about, 263 Grand Ave for Sunday, May 20th, 2018. Is there a motion?
Move approval?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, coming up, we have 3 weddings. The first one is Levy on Surf Drive Beach, the children's swim area, Saturday, June 9, 2018. Are there any thoughts on that one?
No.
Move approval?
Is there a
Second.
second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have a wedding ceremony, Alan Sturdivant at Megansett, Saturday, September 29, 2018.
Move approval?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the third wedding is Major at Falmouth Heights Kite Field on Saturday, September 15, 2018.
Move approval?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have a presentation under the business agenda of the Green Communities Stretch Code. Is Seth Pickering here? Thank you for coming. Please step up. From Mass DOER, we appreciate you coming. This will be coming up at our town meeting. Welcome.
Hi, Seth Pickering from the Department of Energy Resources, Green Communities Division. Thank you, Julian. Madam Chairman, members of the board, thanks very much for having me. I'm going to come and talk to you a little bit about, this presentation is going to be a little bit on, the program, the Green Communities program, but mostly on the stretch code.
Right?
Julie, is there a way I can?
Yes.
So it's been a little while since I've been in Falmouth to talk to the select board. I was here just about a year ago and met with Selectman Patterson and Mr. Suso and a couple of other residents. Good. So, you want me to run that, or? If you like. Or it is that one? Okay, great. Give it a try.
Sorry.
There we go. Awesome. Okay, so thanks very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you before town meeting. The Green Communities Grant Program has been in Massachusetts now since about 2010. We provide for up to $20 million per year annually in grants that are designed to help cities and towns reduce the amount of energy that they use as a municipality. The 5 different requirements have not changed since the beginning of the program, and Falmouth has done a couple of them, but the thing that really needs to be done for the town to be eligible is to have the vote at town meeting to adopt the stretch code. So the reason I'm here is to share information, to help people understand what it is and what it's not, and hopefully address any questions that may come up. So here in Massachusetts, there are 351 municipalities. 216 of them have voted to adopt the stretch code to date. We have 210 green communities out of the 351. We're probably going to have a number more that will apply here in 2018. We have quite a few stretch code votes coming up this spring, and probably have a few with fall town meetings as well. So when you apply to be designated as a green community, what do you get if you're designated? You go through the 5 different criteria. What's the benefit? Basically, we start off with the grants. And your designation grants they're based on a formula. They are a minimum of $125,000, and then there's a formula based on per capita income and population. You can see a couple of the towns that are either nearby off Cape or Mashpee. You can see that Mashpee's been in the program since the very beginning and has gotten almost $450,000 from us to do a number of different projects that are helping them reduce their energy usage. Dartmouth just came in last year. Lakeville's been in for a while. Bridgewater and Middleborough was recent as well. Looking at Falmouth's demographic and your population, about 31,000 people, the initial designation grant here in Falmouth would probably be in the range of $200,000, similar to Middleborough. So what is the stretch code? I'm going to look at my cheat notes from here as opposed to trying to look over my shoulder there. So our program and the requirements, the 5 requirements, were created in the Green Communities Act of 2008. And the one that the stretch code is applicable to talked about minimizing life cycle costs. And so initially the way the legislation was written, it had the potential for 351 different stretch codes around Massachusetts. The Board of Building Regulation and Standards, who implements the stretch code, the building code, said that's not the way it's going to go. We're going to have the base energy code and the stretch energy code. And so that's why it's called the stretch energy code. It is what allows cities and towns to comply with criteria 5 of the 5 different criteria. And so in a town like Falmouth, the stretch code needs to be adopted at town meeting. So, let's see. As I just said, municipalities can meet this by adopting the stretch code. It is based off the IECC, which stands for International Energy Conservation Code, most recent iteration of the IECC. So it's an optional appendix to the existing building code. It is only applicable to new residential construction and a couple of isolated commercial industrial size projects. Training's been done for all the building officials, and it provides a chance for customers of builders to have their houses tested by performance and not just through prescriptive measures. So let's talk about a few stretch code misconceptions. Basically what it's not. It's not new and experimental. It's based on the Energy Star home system that's been in place now for over 20 years here in Massachusetts. And many towns have been doing the stretch code for 7 years or more. Stretch code requires tight and unhealthy homes. This is also not so. Building science has evolved, and although there are fewer air changes that are allowed by code, you have enough air changes to keep your homes healthy. There's no giving up of local control. As is always the case, the building inspector here in town will have control over what is allowed by the building code and what's not. Town residents will be required to update their existing homes. This is not so. Again, only new residential construction is applicable to the stretch code. Additions and renovations are subject to the base code as they are today. So there were some changes in the building codes back in January of 2017 that made things so that the stretch code isn't as big a stretch as it was in the past. You know, at the time when Falmouth voted to not adopt it a few years ago, there have been some changes that have brought the two codes very much closer together. So as I said before, the new base code is based on the IECC 2015 code and an associated new stretch code, which is almost no stretch at all. New residential construction is required to get what's called a HERS rating of 55 or below to pass to get an occupancy permit. So the basic difference between the two codes, the base code and the stretch code, and the cost is the cost for the HERS energy rater, which is required by the stretch code for new residential construction. And the cost can be between $750 to up to probably about $1,500, depending on who the general contractor uses as a sub. But there are Mass Save incentives that are available to help mitigate those extra costs in the Mass Save system. So what does the stretch code apply to? It has all the same applicability as the Mass Base Energy Code. It looks at insulation, it looks at doors and windows, it looks at mechanical equipment, lighting, appliances, building and duct tightness. So why would you want your house tested before you bought it and moved into it? Because prescriptive codes by themselves don't guarantee that you're going to have good air and water tightness or that thermal insulation is effective in the way that it's supposed to be. Even very small air gaps in installation of insulation can reduce R values in your insulation at your house by 50% or more. And the HERS rater provides a third-party verification that your house is going to perform the way it was designed. So what's the HERS process? So when a builder submits a building permit to the building inspector, one of the things that he will submit is a HERS rater application that basically says that the house has been computer modeled and it's going to meet the requirements of the 55 HERS rating. So that's the initial step. And then as the home is being built, the HERS rater works with the contractor and the insulation contractors, and they make sure that the duct tightness is being done correctly through testing. They'll also help with the inspections that need to be done to make sure that insulation is properly installed. And then they do the blower door test that basically measures how tight the house is as part of the final inspection. And then based on all that information, they plug that into their computer model and make sure that the building has met the 55 HERS rating or below. So what is the HERS rating itself? It's a home energy rating system. That's what HERS stands for. So it's basically an annualized energy analysis that looks at the heating, cooling, water heating, lighting, and appliances, and the possibility for on-site power generation, but it's not required by the stretch code. So the reference home is basically an IECC 2006 code home, which is 100. And this is a linear scale. And so basically, where a 2018 stretch code home is a 55 on that scale, as you can see over here, which is a 45% more energy efficient home than the 100 standard home back in 2006. Okay? So the difference between a base code home that you would be building today and a stretch code home is about an 11% more efficient home. There are some commercial and industrial applications of the stretch code. They're for large buildings, either commercial buildings that are 100,000 square feet or greater, and also for laboratories and supermarkets that are 40,000 square feet and greater. So on documentation, in terms of interaction with code officials, residential HERS requirements, the permit, plan review submittal comes in with the HERS rating and is submitted to the building inspector. And then everything is worked out in terms of making sure that it meets it. And the residents don't get the certificate of occupancy until the structure has been proven to meet the 55 or lower. And so it's a little bit different for large commercial, but it's the same process basically. So I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but feel free to ask questions. So these slides show cost benefits comparing the differences between a base code home and a stretch code home. So what this is, we looked at a number of different types of structures, and the ones that I have for you here tonight are 2,550 square foot homes, which is the average size new house in Massachusetts, according to current records. And we're going to run through a couple of different scenarios with electric heat pumps and different types of fuels for your heating system. So what this is showing you is that the initial costs in the red there are the extra costs to do a stretch code home up front, and that there are utility rebates available up to $1,900. And so using a 3-bedroom single-family home with an electric heat pump, you're looking at paying a little bit more for the house up front, about $460. And then you have a little bit extra down payment, a little bit an extra charge to your annual mortgage payments, but with your estimated energy savings costs, you end up in the green by $621 the first year, and a little bit more than that every subsequent year that you live in the home. So it's a little bit more to build the house up front, but with your energy savings, those costs are more than offset. So this chart shows you the basic differences between the two homes, okay? So it talks about the differences. So you can see the construction cost extras on the right, and they are based on things like, doing the HERS rating. The windows are a little bit more energy efficient than the base home. The hot water heater is a different technology and more efficient. Your heating and cooling is a little bit more energy efficient, and your duct leakage is a little bit less. But everything else in terms of the foundation, floor, walls, lighting, ceilings, and air infiltration are the exact same as the existing base code, which you'd have to do today if you built a new house in Falmouth. So this home is a home that's heated with natural gas and is air conditioned. Same thing. So we have some upfront costs that are a little bit more with the utility rebates and incentives. You get that cost out of pocket to either the builder and or the customer, about $1,000, and then you can see the differences in the cost in your energy savings over time. And again, these are using certain assumptions. We used a Worcester, Massachusetts-based model and all this because it's fairly average. Some of these things, with your costs of different fuels and electricity down here, you may actually realize more savings. So again, here's the difference. Natural gas home, you're looking at, again, windows, a little bit more energy efficient gas furnace, cooling, a little bit more efficient, hot water, again, and low infiltration rate. The last one we use, and it's probably not a bad one for the Cape because some places that don't have natural gas available may use propane again. So these cost analyses are all basically the same. It shows a little bit of extra cost up front. It shows you the utility rebates that are available. And then, living in the home, you realize savings every month because you built a more energy efficient house up front. So again, here are the basic differences, not real big differences, but things that will make a difference over time on windows, the efficiency of the heating system, the air conditioning system, the hot water system. The biggest thing is that your home is tested. And so when you take occupancy that the house you paid for is the house you're going to get. Last one we have is oil heat. And you can see that this one, with oil heat is a little bit more upfront because we'll get into the reasons for that in a second. It's basically the difference in the furnaces that are available. To get the extra energy efficiency in an oil furnace, you got to pay quite a bit more. I don't know how many oil homes are being built here in Falmouth these days. I know there are a lot of reasons, from the environment where people might seek to avoid that if they can get on natural gas or do electric, do propane. It takes, the liquid storage out of your home, and you don't have to worry about the aquifer. So same thing here. Extra cost up front. This one's a little bit more expensive up front. But again, you can see the big difference is really the difference between that 83% thermally efficient and 96% thermally efficient oil furnace, and that's a pretty good sized ticket. It's about $1,800 extra by this calculation. So I wanted to be brief, but give you enough information. Here's my contact information. You may know I work out of the Lakeville DEP office. We're nearby. This is my region. We'd love to get some more green communities down here in the Cape. Are there any questions or comments?
Doug?
I have a question. When you refer to the expedited permitting, what's the basic requirement of that?
So it's really easy. Most towns to fulfill our ask on expedited permitting get a letter from town council that says that the local permitting process, so your building permits, anything with the Conservation Commission, take 365 days or less, because that's our requirement. So if that's the normal course of doing business here in Falmouth, if you get a letter from town council that verifies that, you would meet criteria too.
Okay. And in order to actually practically apply this, do we need to have everything have to be online? I mean, all the plans have to be available online to do the work? So,
if the town is going to actually apply to become a green community, you have me as a resource.
Mm-hmm.
We can also look into getting the town signed up with the Cape Light Compact to get what's called a META grant, a Municipal Energy Technical Assistance Grant, where the town basically can use their services for about a $7,500 grant, in time and effort to assist with getting the application together for the town. And the applications are due usually at the end of October every year.
Well, I guess my question is this. We haven't yet moved to online permitting. We have a process where, say, for instance, if you were an architect or a draftsman who worked by hand, old style, not on a computer, you can still submit paper plans.
So that's not a requirement of ours at all.
Okay.
It's really, our requirements are really basic. You could check in with some of the other towns that are doing it. You can check in Mashpee, they've been doing it for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be happy to provide contacts in any other town that's been working with us for quite some time. So, we're not looking to get into your everyday town business, on that score. Whatever works for you guys is fine. And the other thing we really emphasize, and we want to make sure, I'm here tonight because I know town meeting's coming up, but we'll be happy to either come back or do whatever you want to share information with constituencies if you'd like. We really want to make sure, because this is a choice, my program's not a mandate. The towns choose whether or not they want to participate or not.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make sure that the people that are going to go and vote at town meeting feel like they're making an informed decision when they cast their vote. So
what we do, we have precinct meetings. There's probably 3 or 4 of them scheduled. I don't have the schedule with me now, but you can kind of be available if you can work out your schedule to really, it's answering questions. So maybe town manager can speak to you and give you that information to see if you could work that out.
Sure. Yeah. Julian, if you want to give me that schedule, I can come down. We have a contractor available as well, who's a technical expert. I'm not a builder, but our technical expert is a certified builder and has been working with Energy Star for a long time, so.
That would be great. Megan?
I just was wondering, on the links that you've given, are any of these links to this presentation?
No.
Because even just this presentation, I think if we are able to make that available to our town meeting members, answers a lot of questions, so we can figure the logistics out later.
Sure.
but-
So, you know, I sent the presentation to Town Hall, to Julian's administrative assistant, so it's available locally. You know, we'll be glad to make any other materials available
Great, maybe
for
just
public
the town
review.
website, and we can
Yeah.
point folks to it. Great. Sam?
Yes, Seth, I have a question on number 4, which is, I assume it's the municipality purchasing only fuel-efficient vehicles.
Yep.
And what kind of evidence do we need to give you? A formal policy that the selectmen
Yes.
adopt? Is that what's going to be required? And when you say this, obviously, things like dump trucks
Right.
might be a big stretch for us.
So I thought that might come up. So, yes, so both the select board and the school department would have to adopt a policy. But it's really pretty straightforward. Any vehicle that has a gross vehicle weight of 8,500 pounds or greater is exempt from the policy. That's a pretty small pickup truck, to be honest with you. That's like a Ford F-250 or a GMC 2500. Anything that size and bigger is exempt from the policy. Police cruisers are exempt. Emergency response vehicles, you know, like the fire chief, police chief's vehicles where they actually respond to emergencies and carry gear and stuff like that, those are all exempt from the policy. It's basically vehicles that are administrative in nature, which towns have fewer and fewer of all the time. There's no mandate for electric vehicles. There's no mandate for hybrids. And the reason I brought this was because I thought this might come up. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples, right? So for a vehicle that's subject to the policy, a two-wheel drive car has to get a mile per gallon rating of 29 miles per gallon or greater. A four-wheel drive car, 24 miles per gallon. Minivans, two-wheel drive, 20 miles per gallon. Four-wheel drive minivan, 18 miles per gallon. There are two- and four-wheel drive pickup trucks listed here that would be smaller than the 8,500 gross vehicle weight vehicles, and SUVs. So it's basically, you know, what is it and what's the mile per gallon rating, and if it's not identified as something that exempt, when the town purchased a new vehicle that fit any of these requirements of the policy, you'd have to buy one with this mile per gallon rating or higher. And these are currently being reviewed because these have been the ones in place since 2010, but in the past, and the way I'm assuming this will continue to go, there are usually always at least 5 different models of vehicle that you can purchase here in Massachusetts that will meet these mile per gallon ratings if you're buying a new vehicle. The other thing about that is that you don't have to buy a new vehicle. You just have to buy a vehicle that would meet the policy. This policy and that whole criteria is really intended to stop the recycling of junky old Crown Victorias and police cruisers that are no longer police cruisers but are used in different roles. So, you know, they get terrible gas mileage. They usually have, they're beat. That's why they're rolling off the rolls as cruisers. So, you know, again, I would recommend check in with other towns if you have concerns. This has not been an issue of any primary concern for any of my green communities. I have 30 now in my region, so.
Doug?
Would you mind just touching on the other requirements here in this list of
Sure.
5?
Yep.
I don't really understand adopt as of right citing for REAE. Is
Oh,
that-
okay, sure. So the first one is a zoning requirement that I believe the town's already met. Does that sound right, Julian?
That's my understanding.
Yep.
We had a letter from town council on that a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So, but what it is we ask towns to do as-of-right siting for either renewable or alternative energy generation, or research and
okay.
development, or manufacturing. I think Falmouth did manufacturing or R&D, possibly. So.
I think that's right. Okay, and do you see any other ones here that we haven't done?
So you're probably good on criteria 2, you just have to affirm it in your application through a letter from town council. The town will have to establish an energy baseline, and we can help with that. We have free energy tracking software, and the town's already completely immersed in that, to be honest with you. when Paul Gentile was your energy coordinator here, he got the town all set up on that. All the utility-based energy usage, so any of your natural gas and electricity, that data is automatically uploaded into that system. And when Paul was doing that, he set it all up, so that's all done. But the town will have to identify a baseline, and then using audits that we can get through the Cape Light Compact done at no cost to the town, we're going to figure out how we can reduce that baseline by 20%. So that's a work effort. Again, you know, I'm available as a resource. The Cape Light Compact is available as a resource. And the types of audits that we would need for verification of reaching that 20%, those audits can be done at no cost to the town as well.
What if we are
Good to
already
hear.
fairly efficient? I mean, we have done, with
and-
Paul's help, we've done.
and you are.
A ton of things.
Yep, so-
We could be pushed hard to reduce it another 20%.
You might be, but I'm fairly confident that we could get there. But yes, I agree. You know, I don't have a good answer for you, except that I wish that, you know, we had been having Falmouth apply a number of years ago, so we could have counted the LED street light conversion. So we could have counted some of the things that went into your ESCO with Train.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, I'm familiar with all that. I know about all that, but I think that, you know, this is a good-sized town with a lot of infrastructure still. And so I'm pretty confident that we can get to a good, solid 15%, which is what we require, with maybe a 5% that's a little more theoretical, so.
It's great, great presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much, and we'll keep in touch on the precinct meetings.
Okay, look
Thanks so
forward to
much.
it. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks,
Great.
Here's a question.
Okay,
Quick.
quick, yes.
I just want to give an idea of what he might hear.
Okay, quick, run up, sure. Thanks.
Mark Finneran, Precinct 6. There seems to be some inequity here. One of the builders that was here the night that the presentation was originally made first noted that most of the houses that we have now that are being built by the current code, they're so tight that people are opening the windows during the day. So the return is actually probably going to be diminished. Also, he indicated that to meet this, it might require they go from 2x10s to 2x12s in the ceilings, and in certain cases, that's not going to work. So it would require foam insulation, spray foam. And he told me two things. First off, the costs that he indicated were much larger than what you've said they were. And also, there's the thing with this foam, that a lot of people think that after 20 or 25 years, it's going to cause the plywood in your roofs to rot because of the keeping the moisture in. Also, you indicated that oil furnaces were 1,800 or so, which is much more than the extra cost that you quoted. And we have many areas in this town that do not have gas. So I think you're going to get these questions, and there was one other thing I wanted to mention, but sorry, I can't remember it at the moment. But my indication that I got was that people weren't 100% in favor of this because the returns were diminished and the costs could be higher. I was quoted as high as $10,000 for a house. I don't know if that's correct, but I mean, if we get $150,000 in grants and we're building 50 houses a year and it's costing us $10,000 apiece, I mean, it seems to be inequitable, but I'm sure you're going to get plenty of questions from professionals at town meetings, so be ready. Thanks.
Okay, great. Good prep for town meeting, as you said, Mark. Thanks for that. The next presentation is by Town Council Frank Duffy with respect to participating in the opioid litigation class action. Thank you, Frank.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and members of the board. Frank Duffy, Town Council. We all know there's a epidemic going on in our country with addiction and various other medical issues and emotional issues and physical issues and deaths coming from addiction to opioids and similar substances. And some communities are taking action with respect to this opioid situation by participating in actions to recover the damages that they incur. Now, opioid addiction creates certainly damages to individuals, to families, but it also causes damages to the communities where they live. The premises of this litigation is that pharmaceutical manufacturers have fraudulently engaged in a fraudulent scheme to manufacture and distribute in the nation and in the communities their products. Federal and state law requires that these manufacturers monitor the distribution of their products in the stream of commerce, that they detect illegal sales and spikes, which they call, where they are located in particular locations. They are required to notify local authorities, and they're also required to take steps to suspend or prevent the sale of these opioids if they can do so. For the most part, the lawsuit is based upon the premises that the pharmaceutical manufacturers have failed in this duty. And this failure is actually an act of negligence, which can be attributed as the proximate cause of the economic harm that is suffered by communities that must respond to people who have opioid addiction. Now, we're talking about illegal drugs, naturally, heroin and synthetic drugs, but also legal painkillers such as OxyContin, Vicodin, codeine, morphine, and some others. It is estimated, and this is one of the premises of the litigation, that anywhere from 50 to 80% of the opioid addiction starts with people using legally prescribed opioid drugs in the form of painkillers or other drugs. And this current epidemic of abuse and addiction has burdened every community in some way or another, and each community has incurred significant costs in trying to deal with these problems. So the purpose of the litigation is to recover these costs as damages through the judicial system and a claim presented in court. I'd like to just give you a couple of examples of some of the typical damages that you'd be looking for in litigation of this type. And I do not have a figure for these damages in the town of Falmouth. We would really, if we're going to go forward, would have to task the various departments to come up with these figures. We would have to ask the police department to give us their figures, the fire rescue department to give us their figures, the school department, and any other community service, the Falmouth Human Services, for example, that deal with people who are suffering this addiction and the costs that they incur dealing with them.
So Frank, just to emphasize, even though the premise before the board would be to join the litigation at no cost because it's a contingency class action, there still would be, a cost in the town employees collecting this information and some effort.
Well, yes, that's absolutely true. This is, and I will get to this in a minute, but this is technically not a class action.
Oh,
so I'll explain how that works. But some of the costs, for example, in the field of healthcare, you have the cost of maintaining rehabilitation clinics and addiction treatment centers to the extent that the municipality partially or fully funds them. You have the administration of preventive medicine programs. You also have the additional cost to the community of employee health benefit plans, which are incrementally increasing because they must cover a lot of the costs that we're dealing with here. You also have incremental costs year to year of workman's compensation benefits because many of our employees are suffering addiction and getting injured on the job, resulting in workman's compensation claims. You also have a fairly significant cost, and this may be the biggest cost, and that is the cost associated with the maintenance and development of first responders. You have wages and salaries of first responders. You have their overtime wages, which is significant. You have the cost of special training that they must go through to deal with overdose patients. And you have also, which probably could be documented, excessive requests for leave and absenteeism among first responders who suffer from the trauma of the onslaught of overdose responses and also the physical and emotional distress it causes them dealing with these problems. You also have ambulance costs incurred with many, many constant runs to the hospital and other treatment centers. Another cost that's well known associated with opioid addiction is the cost of crime and related expenses, the cost of maintenance and deployment of law enforcement, and addiction-related criminal activities such as theft, armed robberies, driving under the influence, and others that you can think of. We incur costs at the town level and also at the school level and through Family and Human Services in preparing and presenting educational programs. There's homelessness that has been documented due to opioid addiction. And there are other miscellaneous costs, one of which is that many people with opioid addictions seek refuge in our parks, in our libraries, and other public spaces, and it's a cost of maintaining these public spaces and dealing with the individuals who have the problems. So there are basically a couple of options that are available to a community like Falmouth. One, which has been referred to on occasion, is to rely upon the state, particularly the state's Attorney General, to step forward and act on behalf of the individual communities in the state. It's been talked about in Massachusetts, but it really hasn't taken effect yet. It may not take effect. The Attorney General, if the Attorney General files litigation, will represent the state and seek to recover damages for the state. It's my understanding right now there's not an opportunity for the individual cities and towns to become plaintiffs in that kind of an action. And if they're not individual plaintiffs and the Attorney General is successful in recovering damages, then any of the damages recovered that would be passed on to the cities or town would be at the largesse of the Attorney General, or it would be authorized by the general legislature. I think this is an area where we probably need to get more information. But I think in the end, right now, the present situation, that there's no guarantee of a recovery that we could put a definite figure on. The second alternative is to file a lawsuit on behalf of the town. And generally, each town must file its own lawsuit. So this is not technically a class action. Now, I just want to give you the four criteria for a class actions, more for the public, but you have a class action if the class is so numerous that joining them all together in one suit is impractical. There are questions of law or fact that are common to all the members of the class. The claims or defenses of the representative parties, that is, the people who are the notional or nominative plaintiffs, are typical of both claims and defenses of all the other members of the class, and that the representative parties will fairly and adequately protect the interests of the class. Well, I think you can take a look at the various communities in Massachusetts, and you can see that a city like New Bedford or Boston, which is a large metropolitan area, is going to have a different set of facts and a different set of claims than a town like Falmouth. So therefore, it doesn't really fit into the category of a class action per se, which is kind of unfortunate in a way, because a typical class action, you simply sign up, you sit back, and you wait for somebody to send you a check. I'm sure you get these advertisements all the time to join a class action because you put some kind of roofing on your house, or you had some kind of problem with an airplane trip on a vacation or something. It's not that simple. The individual communities have to bring their own case. But there's ways, I'll talk about how you do it in a minute, but that means that each individual community must devote its own resources to identifying its losses, proving its damages, subjecting its administrators and department heads possibly to depositions, and they must be available to attend trials and testify at trials. There's two sources of potential, two approaches to this. And we have been approached as a community through the town manager and through me by two different groups that are proposing to represent the town in opioid litigation. The first group would enlist us to join what is called the multi-district litigation, where there are a number of individual lawsuits, basically very similar but not quite the same, that would be filed and consolidated in a single court. It's the United States District Court for the District of Northern Ohio, which is in Cleveland. I understand there are more than 300 cases pending out there right now. There may be a lot more, because cities and towns are signing up frequently for this. The way these cases are being handled in Cleveland, it is my understanding, is that there's one judge in one courtroom where all these cases are being handled. That judge is basically forcing everybody to mediation. And a lot of the mediation is kind of class litigation. In other words, there'd be a number of people in the room representing various organizations. And because of the complexity of litigation and the sheer number of the litigation, they view compulsory mediation as the most likely source of, or avenue towards a remedy. Now, we do have a proposal from a consortium of law firms. Some are in Massachusetts, others are in other states, that would do this work for us on a contingency fee basis of 25%. There would be no upfront retainer or costs incurred by the town, and the guarantee is that there be no fee unless there is a successful recovery. But again, each town would be responsible for identifying and being able to prove its own damages. And the second approach is by a different consortium of law firms. Again, this is a consortium of law firms that are located in Massachusetts and located elsewhere in the country. They're avoiding this multi-district litigation, and they are recommending that you file your claim in your own state. And you do so in state court, which, as an attorney, raises the question, well, won't the defendant immediately remove it to the United States District Court in Boston? And that may very well be the case, but at least the case would be prosecuted in Massachusetts. The theory is that you will force a defendant, pharmaceutical companies, to stand for trial before a local jury who might be more inclined to hear the plea of local communities in their award of damages. But again, the towns must be able to identify their claims, they must be able to prove them, and they must be able to attend and prosecute the trials if it becomes necessary. These cases will also be subject to mediation, but it's a little different philosophy, I think. They're looking more to push the mediation through the threat of a local jury and a more responsive jury. Again, the financial terms for the town are the same. They're willing to do this for a 25% contingency fee. There's no fee unless there's recovery. As I said, Mr. Suso and I have received a lot of literature on this. We have talked to a few of these people on the phone, but we have not actually interviewed with them, and we have not actually gone into great detail because we would like some instructions from you as to how you feel about this. One of the things we could do is we could interview representatives of these groups, put together a report, and come to you with a recommendation. Are you willing to do anything that you would like us to do?
I like the idea of interviewing the firms and then coming with a recommendation. The firms have contacted me to, as well, just to, kind of to get their information out there in consideration. I just think probably the best way to do that would be to get consolidated information so that the board hears the same facts and can discuss it at the same time. Anyone else have a preference?
That sounds like the right approach.
I agree.
Sam?
I don't know what the cost is going to be. I don't know whether Julian has some kind of an estimate, but I think the process of actually kind of evaluating the impact and cataloging it, coming up with a dollar figure, I think is actually a useful thing. I mean, for our town, but also in an aggregate of all the other towns in the state and the country. So it sounds to me like this could be a valuable exercise that would benefit us, even if we don't win the suit.
I think we should sue Congress for repealing legislation to enable the DEA to prosecute these.
Following up on Mr. Patterson's question, I think that if you want to go forward, we're going to have to do that, Mr. Patterson. We're going to have to quantify the impact in our community of responding to the opioid epidemic. And it probably impacts many departments. I can think of a couple right off the top of my head, the police and the fire rescue and the human services and the schools, but it may spread into other departments as well. And it may be more than you think, maybe less. I don't know what it's going to be.
Good analysis, though. Mr. Sousa, would you calendar for probably the second meeting in May? Look again at this issue that'll, I think, get us through town meeting and then let you have an opportunity to interview and make a recommendation back to the board?
And bring to the board a recommendation to act upon to...
Correct.
Certainly happy to.
Just as town council has suggested, Megan?
And just as part of that presentation that you do, you know, I know we're talking about cataloging some of these things and making our staff available depending on if mediation doesn't work in either one of these.
I think in mediation, they're going to have to participate, whether it's a trial or mediation.
Right,
'cause
but
mediation-
I guess I would just like to have some information on what the process, not just who you recommend, but what the process will look like, you know, if we go with a particular one option or the other, so just so that the public gets that information as well, so they understand that we're committing to something where we're not just gathering information, but we may need to make staff available for certain proceedings at certain times.
Okay, certainly.
Great. Sam?
I know it's difficult to probably come up with good estimates, but it seems to me that the impact on families and therefore on our employees, even though that employee may not be suffering from addiction, they're suffering because of the impacts on their family. I know as a teacher, I saw the impacts of family dysfunctionality on my students, and I know that the school department is experiencing this, and therefore is trying to provide social worker and counselor kinds of support services for families. You know, I hope that we don't just simply look at the addiction of our employees, but also the impact on our employees of having an addicted family member.
Could I ask one more question?
Sure.
When you look into this, when you come back to us, will you inquire with these attorney crews whether or not they intend to include the distributors of these pharmaceuticals as well as the pharmaceutical manufacturers?
Oh, sure, yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on next. Very heavy agenda still ahead of us. The report from the Recreation Committee.
Any word on that, Doc?
Did you want to take up that other?
Yeah, we were unable to get a response from Mr. Frazier tonight.
So the board may want to choose to carry this a week. You're meeting again a week from tonight, or to make
Hold
your
off
best
one sec,
best
sorry,
move.
little housekeeping issue here. Does the board, what's the pleasure? Do we want to hold off and get, this will be the third time we've heard this, Doc. Megan?
Normally, I would say, you know, it's not a big deal to wait, but I would just say that this would, we've asked this applicant to come, you know, this is the second time they've gone through the other process. I just have the feeling that if our harbor master was very concerned, this was on the agenda before, it's on the agenda again, I feel that he would have been here or clarified. I know he's really busy, so I'm not critiquing him in any way. I'm just saying I think it lends some, I don't know, to me it lends a tenor of perhaps it not being as big of an issue as
Sam?
might
Yeah,
otherwise be.
I'm concerned because we may be looking at an opinion here rather than something that's actually based in regulation. You know, it's one thing if it's just an opinion because he has a general concern about a standalone piling that's not associated with the dock, that's some distance off. And I know I have gotten caught in a boat in the fog and been following a bearing and didn't expect to find anything, and all of a sudden there's a moored boat that just happened to have thrown their anchor out. But you know, we're talking about property rights to some extent, and I feel like those kinds of concerns, which are speculative at best, don't weigh as much for me. And so I'm inclined to go ahead and approve this application, which includes that mooring piling that goes along with the slipping of that boat.
Are you stating that as a motion?
I'll make that as a motion, and so that we can deal with it.
We will. Is there a second before we continue discussing?
I would second it.
Doug?
I'm not concerned about the fact that they've had to come back twice. The second time was upon their request, not on our request. And so I don't, the concern that they've had to come back again and that we might be asking them to wait another week to clarify this, I would hope we would not worry too much about that, to wait one more week just to make sure that we are protecting partly our employee who has made a recommendation working for us. I would hope we would wait until we found out that.
Doug?
We've already closed the hearing. It's not as if we're asking for more testimony. We're not going to cost them any more money. It's just one more week. I think it's okay if we wait one more week and find out, clarify. Perhaps we would end up making a recommendation that the piling have a marker or a reflective tape or some sort of improvement.
Or maybe it could very well be, say, leave it exactly the way it is once we find out from harbor masters what his concern was.
We can also make that recommendation right now. It, can be a condition of the granting of the license that the piling have a reflective or, component to it so that, there's less danger at night or something. That's something that could be included as well. Any more discussion before we take the vote? Sam, did you want to make that part of your motion?
Oh, yes, I think that's an excellent idea. I think that should be a condition that, I've experienced it myself. I could see why, it could be a but it could be a problem. It's not necessarily going to be a problem. And so, we're dealing in probabilities here, and I just I find it hard, given the fact that the Conservation Commission really wanted that boat moved further into deeper water. And really to do that and not have a ridiculously long dock really kind of requires putting a piling in, and that doesn't mess up the bottom plants and animals as much as putting in a pier with a platform. So I don't find it as obtrusive, and anybody that navigates a boat at night better be really on top of everything anyway. They're taking a certain amount of risk that they know in order to be able to navigate at night. So those are the issues I have, but I think requiring the piling to have a reflective wrap or whatever around that's visible 360 degrees is actually a good condition to put on it.
All right, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of approving the license subject to a reflective component being added to the entire circumference of the piling. All those in favor?
Wait, just can I ask one question first?
Sure.
Our original recommendation, or what we originally passed, had a condition about the other boat. Do we need to amend our approval with that, referring to that also?
Good point. We never got to that. We got caught up in the piling. So.
Right. No, this is the dinghy, the inflatable dinghy.
The original condition, we said it was limited to just one boat, and if we're going to change our condition, our motion,
we should include that.
Occasional dockage of second boat.
Sam, do you want to add that the dinghy is allowed or not in your motion?
I'm trying to think of the wording such that it is only an occasional or transient use and not a permanent feature of the dock.
That's fine.
And yes, I'd be happy to include. I think it's an excellent idea, Doug.
In that case, as amended, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. And you got those conditions, Mr. Clow?
I did.
Thank you. Great. Okay, now Recreation Committee, thank you for your patience. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Robert Brown. I'm the member of the Recreation Committee, and we wanted to come before the board and give you some of our recommendations for the upcoming town meeting. Some of our members weren't able to make it today. They were actually going to speak to you, so I'm going to have to pinch hit for them in regards to the all-purpose field at Falmouth High School. But first, I was going to come talk to you about Article 40, which is a Fuller Field. And I think this is a wonderful project right here in the center of town. The community preservation, which I'm the Recreation Committee member. I'm only here speaking for the Recreation Committee. We think it's a great project. We voted as a board to support this project. The Fuller Field baseball field needs a lot of work. The last time it had work, I believe, paid for through the town in a large scale is when they improved the lighting of the field in approximately 2006, 2007, and that was with community preservation funds also, I think in an amount of almost $350,000. And so in the athletic master plan that was filed with the town on January 31st, 2017, this master plan said the only thing good at Fuller Field was the lighting, and everything else was either ranked 3 or 4 as below average or poor. So the Commodores, and we thank as the board, the Commodores, for putting this project together. This project is slightly under a ½ inch. I imagine these are all volunteers. It took a lot of time. They put this project together for the town. And it was signed off by our Recreation Acting Director, Joe Olenek. But the Commodores put this together. And it wasn't just for the Commodores. The Falmouth High School baseball team plays here. I understand sometimes the junior varsity team plays there and the freshman team plays there. And also Babe Ruth occasionally plays a game there when the infield at Sandwich Road gets swamped and it doesn't drain. But that's another story. But I'm here to talk about Fuller Field. So this project is Article 40. We hope that the Board of Selectmen can support this at town meeting. I think it's very important. I think it's also important that it wasn't piecemeal. This $477,000+ should be done in one shot. And the reason is that whatever work needs to be done there, the price is going to continue to go up. And the machines that they have to bring on the field to do the work, I don't think we want the machines to come back twice. The machines coming back twice may hurt our grass fields. And we all know about grass fields and how they need to be rested, they need to be watered, they need to be fertilized, and they need to not be dug up. So I think it's important that we get this done in one shot. And the most important thing about this project also, it brings us up to 2018, the American Disabilities Act. In 1990, this law was passed, and this Fuller Field baseball field is seriously lacking accommodations for disabled children, who could be bat boys, bat girls, injured players, disabled veterans, seniors, and accessibility, I think, is very important. In addition, another factor that the Commodores put into this plan is safety netting. If any of you have been to a game there, and the foul balls that are hit, they come flying up, they come flying at you, especially on the visitor side. It's very dangerous, and I think it's important this work gets done. I think it's urgent. I think this is a great open recreation, active, spectator, community preservation project, and I hope the Board of Selectmen could help move this project and get it voted at town meeting. So on the baseball theme, I'm going to pinch it for the all-purpose field at the high school. And Walter Crotty, a member of the Board of Education, is also going to help me, and he'd like to speak too. Okay. All right. In regards to that, once again, I'd like to thank the Board of Education for putting this project forward. This is one of the things in the athletic field master plan that they talked about, that we needed an all-purpose field. An all-purpose field will take the place of 3 fields. An all-purpose field has been, the master plan recommended either 3 of them or 9 grass fields. I think it's our fiscal responsibility to have an all-purpose field that is artificial turf that'll take all the use and abuse that a field takes. This artificial turf field will be 750 uses compared to 180 uses that a grass field could do a year. I think it's important that this is a start of the master plan to get an artificial turf field in place, and I think it's important. As a recreation committee, we voted for the senior center to be built right next door to the recreation department, with sort of the asterisk that the football program would be moved. Because when that senior center gets built, it's going to take out the playground there. And that playground is used, it's probably one of the most used playgrounds that is not tied into a school. And you see kids playing there when their brothers and sisters are playing downstairs or doing other activities. And it's a very busy playground, and especially in the summer. I think Joe has approximately 170 campers that come to the rec department in the summer, and they hang out there, and they hang out on the side, they hang out on the basketball court, and they play games below. When this senior center goes in, that playground's going to go, and maybe even the basketball court. I'm not sure about that. And when that goes, we need room where the football program is. for a playground, maybe a basketball court, as well as to put those 170 campers. And Kathleen Hayes was kind enough to come over one of our meetings of the Disability Commission, and she has a great idea about having an inclusion playground in Falmouth, and that could be a possible place for Find a Home. And I think, the moving of the all-purpose field is a community project. I think it's going to serve the youth, the seniors, and the adults in use of an all-purpose field, that can be easily maintained and less wear and tear, and I think, once again, fiscally responsible. So I'm going to leave the rest to Walter.
Thank you very much. Great job. Hi,
Thank you very
Walter.
much. I know I've spoken in front of many of you before. Just to give you a little background where I'm coming from, I grew up in a small town, smaller than Falmouth, Winchester, Massachusetts, and all our fields were on the grounds of the high school. And I first got to Falmouth when I played for Falmouth in the Cape Cod League. And I moved up here permanently in 2000, and I've had jobs as a coach and athletic director at schools over in Hyannis. So I was appalled to see that they were still commuting players back and forth from downtown out to the high school. So I think it's way overdue, number one. That's my first point. The second point, to build on what Bob mentioned, is there's a lot of other reasons to do this. Number one is the recreation things for the kids, and they've also spoken to the senior citizens group and the disabled people, and there'd be room to put activities for them down there also, which would be a good reason. And to touch on the Cape Cod League, I've been involved with them since I've been back up here, and they say that outfield never recovers from the football. They say it's in awful shape. So they say it's one of the worst fields in the Cape Cod League because of that. So I just wanted to reassure you of a couple of things. As you may remember, this came up at the last town meeting. And I'm a member, and I spoke to it. And I'm astounded at people there that will come up with things that they know very little about just to hear themselves talk. And usually it's a negative opinion. And they treated this like we just thought of this the day before.
Well, we'll have plenty of time for more education this time, which is one of the reasons we appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, so we will give you plenty of education. But I just wanted to reassure you, we've been looking at this for over a year and a half. So we have looked at all the health aspects, which somebody brought up. We've looked at all the cost analysis. What's a better deal? It saves the town and the school $300,000 to build, as Bob mentioned, a turf field, artificial turf field, as opposed to 2 grass fields. And the maintenance cost on the turf field is substantially less than the grass fields. So from a practicality standpoint, in terms of use, as well as cost, I just wanted to let you know that we've looked at all of those things. So if you hear these off-the-wall comments come up at the town meeting, hopefully you can feel comfortable that when we address them, that we know what we're talking about. And maybe if you can reinforce the fact that you've heard about this, and I know all of you people are in favor of moving that field out to the high school. So I just wanted to reassure you that we've put a lot of research into this. We've found infill that eliminates the health programs. So we're going to use that. At the cost standpoint, it saves the town $300,000 to build the turf field as opposed to 2 grass fields. And third, from a practicality standpoint, all the coaches want the kids to play on this because when they go to other high schools, that's the kind of field they play on, is artificial turf. So there's a lot of reasons to do this. And I just wanted to reassure you and answer any questions you might have on the research we put into this and hopefully get your support at the meeting when it comes up. I had one question I ran by Julian, and if you want to give me an answer or an opinion, I read the warrant, and it said that the cost had not been there in time to put it in there. So my question is, we have the cost analysis. Can we bring that up at the meeting, and can we approve not only to do the field, but also the cost that's involved?
Is there going to be an overhead
Yeah,
information?
I have the answer to that, Madam Chair. The Finance Committee is going to bring that up on the town meeting floor.
Yeah.
Anyone from the board have a question? Doug?
I definitely am in favor of the artificial turf. As you can tell by our history, we're not good at natural grass maintenance. The question I have for Mr. Crotty or anybody in the Recreation Committee, do we have a strong policy for the 2018 season for management of the grass fields? Because it seems like we have a heavy rain and then the coaches will run out there and play on it the next day and it's killing the fields. And I think we need not only a policy but an enforcement and some penalties for people that aren't adhering to the policy.
Now, are you talking about the grass field at
The grass field, yeah.
Yeah. And there's-
That might be something more for town management to discuss. I don't know if anyone knows it.
I probably could answer that
Can you? Okay, great, Bob. Great.
There's a very strict policy.
Our Recreation Committee got canceled twice this month due to winter storms. One of the subjects that were going to be on our agenda was to bring in user groups and go over the form of the user groups about using it during inclement weather and encourage groups to do the right thing and encourage groups and others to do the right thing also. Also, as a committee, that we came up with some recommendations, possibly looking for some community preservation funds about what to do about Trotting Park and the overuse and the illegal use of that park. When people go use that without signing up or clearing with the recreation department or with Joe. And I've been at the Little League baseball field, and you'll see, a dozen or more cars drive up there, and they'll have an impromptu soccer game, and they're usually adults, and they're usually adult males with cleats and digging up the field. And those are the things that I think that we need to look at as a town and possibly use, come up with some solutions from fencing, possibly to even surveillance cameras. I mean, they have surveillance cameras now that'll trigger with motion and ping somebody on a telephone, and you can pop it up on your phone, just like those little doorbell things that you see on TV, and you can see who's using the field, and you could even see, then you can look on another page to see if it's been reserved by a team or not, and maybe that would cut down on it. But you're right, something needs to be done, and I think that we're, as a recreation committee, we're going to talk to the groups about it and self-police and do the best we can, and hope, and it's all going to need money.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug, sorry.
On Article 40 and also on the fields, both of those are Finance Committee articles that we typically don't make recommendations on, but I would like us to put it on our agenda for next week. I think they're both articles that would be good for the Board of Selectmen to step forward and make a statement as to where our support lies in those two ones.
I agree.
Both the baseball field and for the artificial turf.
Great, we can schedule that.
And I think it's in line with past, we've had this conversation before, we've talked about, when we were talking about the senior center, that was part of the discussion, we sort of made those statements in the past. The only thing I would just like to comment is just to commend the Rec Committee, Commission on Disabilities, and Coalition on Aging. I know that they've had some conversations, they've been attending. Kathleen Haynes, as Bob Brown was mentioning, has attended some of their meetings to try and create that dialogue so that whatever, if that space becomes available, that it's really maximized to the benefit of the greatest number of folks here who live here and who come and visit and enjoy our town. So it's great that those committees have really put that work in to collaborate on this. So.
And a better, better plan and a better product for the town. I really was just thrilled reading the enterprise that had happened, and Bob, appreciate your leadership along with Joe's and the committee, and we've started to do a lot of joint meetings so that you can get the the brain power of folks that look at the same issue from a different angle. And Kathleen from the what's the name?
Commission on Disabilities.
Commission on Disabilities. It's just incredibly active and really bringing that in. I think that's the time has come, and again, we'll have a better product for everyone. Doug?
Just to reiterate what you said, we promised a year ago to support the school department in their effort to move the field. So I think it is appropriate what Mr. Jones said about supporting that.
Great. We'll have a further discussion on that. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. Thanks
really
for sticking
appreciate
around.
it. Great. The next item on the agenda is to interview, vote, and appoint committee member for a Board of Health. Mr. Van Moy.
Just a quick addition.
Sure.
Phase 2 is we want to build 2 baseball fields out at the high school also, but we just want to work on the
on the football. It's really a multi-purpose field. It'll be for a bunch of sports.
Great.
But just so you know, we want to move those out there too. That will come up at a later time, so.
Okay, you're blowing my mind.
So we also have, well, I think all the fields should be out, there's room for them. They should all be out on the campus of the school.
And I think a long-term plan makes perfect sense. Thanks, Walter.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So what makes you interested in this committee?
Well, first of all, I've been looking for an opportunity to get involved with town governance, and when I ran into John Waterbury and he told me about the vacancy in the committee, it really piqued my interest. Water quality is a major public health issue that falls under the purview of the Board of Health, particularly with respect to the release of nitrogen and phosphorus from septic systems. And I've made a career of studying nitrogen and phosphorus in all kinds of environments, from wetlands to lakes to the ocean. So I feel like I have some expertise to contribute in that area. Over the past few weeks, I've been familiarizing myself with septic design. I'm not an engineer, and I admit I'm a bit on the learning curve still, but I feel like it's material I can get in command of relatively quickly. Of course, it won't be a number of years before I get to the level of expertise of some others on the board, of course, and I'll be relying on them in that capacity. But I've conducted research on bacteria and viruses. I've taken graduate level microbiology courses, and so I think that gives me a background to make other contribution to the business that the Board of Health handles. And I'm the chairman of the Radiation Safety Committee at Woods Hole Oceanographic. That's an NRC mandated committee with a mandated mission and action, so I'm familiar in working in a regulatory framework. With that, I hope you'll consider my application favorably and give me an opportunity to serve on the Board of Health.
Your expertise and the background is so key, because just in my time on the Water Quality Collaborative, it's part politics, it's part finances, it's part chemistry, it's part experimentation. I mean, it really, I think, with all that we have moving right now with the Board of Health and our water quality endeavors and trying to see what the better mousetrap is, I think you'd fit in a perfect need. So happy to see you applying, and thank you for that. Is there a motion from the board?
I move approval.
Or questions?
The term ending when?
So a motion by Doug?
Term ending 6/30/20.
Yeah.
I'll second, but also commend Dr. Waterbury on being such a good arm twister.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good point. Next on the agenda, we have an application for a commercial shellfish license. Louis Remiza, are you here? Welcome. If you'd come up.
Louis Remiza.
Hi.
Hi.
And could you present your request for this license?
Reinstatement of my commercial shellfish license, which I gave up in 2009 because of my medical condition.
I note that the Shellfish Constable has written a letter of non-support, which essentially, as I understand it, has to do with the number of permits and trying to schedule how they should be issued. His statement was that many prospective applicants are eagerly awaiting when this commercial slot drops below 50. So apparently there is high demand and a process for moving to the next application. So he has not recommended that we grant this permit request. Thank you. Are there any questions from the board for Mr. Remiza? Megan?
Well, I guess I'm just not sure. Is there a waiting list? Is that what Mr. Martinson is saying, that there's a waiting list for permits and that Mr. Remiza isn't on it and is just in that the hardship request kind of jumps that line? Do we know what that process is, Mr. Town Manager? Do you know?
My understanding is that the number that was set at 50 and affirmed by the board at that time has not had any vacancies come up since that was first voted, but there would be, when the number drops below 50, that would become available for petitioners to be considered to be added to that list.
So there isn't, okay, so there isn't a waiting line. It's just when there's an opening,
Correct.
everybody can apply.
Right.
Correct.
I
But
understand.
in his letter, he says, many prospective applicants are eagerly awaiting to apply for a commercial slot when the number drops below 50.
Right.
So he does have a waiting list.
Or he knows
Well,
people
he-
who are waiting, I guess is what he's saying.
Right, we've been notified that there are many interested.
Right.
But we
It's
don't have a
just-
formal list and a Richter scale about considering them.
So there essentially is no opening at this point.
The problem is all 50 commercial licenses are already.
There were quite a few more than 50 that originally were held.
Yep.
And the people, they were allowed to keep them if they had them. Last year, we did re-grant one who had, for a medical hardship, also had it, let it lapse, and we did grant them to be reinstated. I know that there are a few other people out there who have had theirs lapse for medical reasons. There are other people who are holding on to it because they know if they let go of it, they lose it. And the shellfishing just hasn't really been that sustainable commercially in Falmouth. I understand what Mr. Martinson's doing, and I guess I'm being a little bit of a double standard that with Mr. Frazier, I was wanting to do exactly what he said. On Mr. Martinson, I'd be more inclined to grant this commercial, or the re-application of this commercial shellfish license to Mr. Armizov.
Well, that's why I was sort of asking what the process is. I mean, this is, I totally, value what Mr. Martinson is saying. I also understand that, we do have a long history of folks who are shell fishermen, and, this is clearly something that probably Mr. Armizov did for a really long time.
I've
and
been
he did
doing it for 33 years.
with his family members, and I understand, he had this health situation, so it isn't as if, he's sort of out of the blue asking for one, or that he only had it for a little while. He's done it for a long time. So I'm inclined to agree, I think, with Selectman Jones that in this instance, even though I think it's a very valid recommendation we're getting from our shellfish constable, that, I think this is a somewhat special situation for someone who is local, who's lived here for a very long time, and who probably, made a living doing this for many years.
Yes.
So is that a motion?
Yes, I mean, or if Mr. Jones wants to make the motion, I'll second it.
I'm happy to make the motion to reinstate Mr. Armizov's commercial shellfish license.
And Ms. Braga
I would
did the
second it.
second. Is there any further discussion?
Just that Mr. Martinson's letter is not exactly clear, and it seems there's maybe possibly room for one more, because it says, we are, prior to the commercial shellfish permit moratorium, the board held a grace period to allow residents an opportunity to apply for permits. As shellfish stocks are improving in Falmouth, there continues to be a demand for additional permits. We are nearing 50 commercial fishermen, which is the established number of permits the board determined should be issued. Many prospective applicants are eagerly awaiting to apply.
So we have more, right now there are more than 50. And they're waiting to that number to get below 50, because then we could give some new ones.
Oh,
So
it's
more
nearing 50, it's above 50, but nearing.
Right.
I see.
Yeah, I get the.
I was misunderstanding that.
Right.
Yep.
Any further questions before we take the vote? All those in favor of granting the license?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next, we have on the agenda the request for a waiver of special permit fee for the Falmouth Art Market. Is someone from the market here? This is something that we have allowed in the past.
I move approval to the extent that we can waive the fees.
Is there a second?
Second.
And so that'd be the 100 first, 100 last, and the 100 to the reduced for a total of 300. Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have to vote to consider a dog hearing decision appeal request as timely filed. Mr. Suso, would you please present this?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. You might recall from the paperwork that Captain Brian Reed has provided that as following the policy that the board established, he conducted a dog hearing this past fall. And pursuant to that, there are rules of procedure regarding appealing the decision from the dog hearing. And as you've probably seen from the notes that Captain Reed has provided, Mr. Jaglinski had some interaction through the hearing and also subsequent to it with Captain Reed as to the appeal period time. And apparently there was a question from Mr. Jaglinski about whether or not calendar days or business days applied to the appeal process. I do note it appeared to have been clarified in an email from Captain Reed, but I noticed that Mr. Jaglinski has asked for the opportunity to appeal or to inquire of the board whether you would consider an appeal of the decision that has been made. So that is the question before you this evening, if you would decide to entertain and hear an appeal from Mr. Jaglinski to the decision which was made last fall.
Okay, is Mr. Jaglinski, could you step to the podium, sir? And just state your name.
Brian Jaglinski.
Hi, so the question I have is, Brian Reed from the police department did send you an email on November 21st
Correct.
stating that you will have until November 26th to submit a written request. That was...
Right, and then that was, I believe, a Tuesday, and Thanksgiving and Black Friday were two of those days in that week.
Yep.
Which was the 23rd and 24th. So it would have put me to get a written submitting letter, and it would have put me past the 26th. By the time I received the email, which was the 21st, I didn't have 10 days at that point to submit the letter.
So there were so the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, so there were 6 days to do it, and what was the...
Two of which were the weekend, and one was Thanksgiving.
All right, so let's see, was the 26th, what day of the week was that? That would have been a, let's see.
21st
was a Tuesday.
21st was a Tuesday when the email occurred.
Okay.
So the 26th would be a Saturday.
So you had, and it was 2 o'clock, so you had Tuesday and Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
And so basically you just didn't do it Tuesday or Wednesday?
Well, that wouldn't give me 10 days to send in a written letter to you guys. That
You
was
needed
my
one day.
concern.
No, in other words, what he said is you just send in the letter either Tuesday or Wednesday or before the 26th.
Right, I think he said, so you have until November 26th to submit a written request.
Right, but you could have done it
Written
Tuesday or
request,
Wednesday.
Well, I was under the impression it had to be a written request that
Right.
yeah. And that wouldn't give me 10 days to send it in to you guys. So I didn't know how I
No, you didn't need 10 days, you only had to do it in one day. You could just literally written the request on the 21st and brought it to town hall, or on the next day, Wednesday.
I thought I was...
Or sent it by email.
Sent in to you guys, so I didn't...
Or send it by mail
I guess it
or
was a
email.
misunderstanding
By
on my
email,
part,
right.
then I
You have the
don't-
email.
Okay, so you didn't understand the process. Okay.
Apparently not.
Does anyone else from the board have a question?
I have a question. What was the date of the original decision and the
November
original?
16th?
The 16th.
I don't know whether it's appropriate, but I guess I have a question about why you don't feel like you were given a fair hearing.
I feel like I was told to come to a meeting, not knowing I was blindly, I thought it was a hearing about a dangerous dog hearing. It was a whole neighborhood got together and they corroborated stories. They had a chance to get 10 people to have their stories together, and I walked into a room, I didn't even know what the basis of the interview was. It just said show up at the police station, and I didn't have any witnesses to go again to side with me, or I didn't have any time to prepare my statement to present to the chief of police, and I just feel like I don't know, it wasn't fair on my side, I feel. That's all.
I have a question for town council. Frank? Quick question on the, what's the standard for the board to look at this question in terms to whether to grant the extension?
think Mr. Suso asked me a question about this a couple of weeks ago, and I responded by saying it was within your discretion to allow this appeal because it's a policy, not a bylaw. Is that correct, Mr. Suso?
Yes.
The 10-day appeal period is a policy, not a bylaw, so it can be waived by the body of the creator.
Okay, but the standard for waiver, for example, would the board be able to grant the waiver if there was a feeling that there was a mistake, a misunderstanding?
The standard, I believe, would be for good cause shown, so if you believe the story is good cause, you may grant it. Yeah.
All right. So kind of back to my question about whether, you know, why really you didn't just go ahead and send the email on Tuesday or Wednesday? Do you have a good cause reason for that?
Like I said, it was just, I thought I had to send in a written letter. I don't know, from the way I read the email. I didn't know I could come into you and hand you a letter. I thought it had to be sent through the mail, and I didn't. That's the only reason I
And so you
figured
thought
I didn't have 10 days.
maybe it was like too much, like it would take too much
I
time
had
to
called
put
you
together?
guys Monday. I had called into the office Monday and set forth my, how I felt, just because I didn't understand the email. So I thought I had to send you guys in a written letter through the mail.
Yeah.
And in my head, that would take more than 10 days.
So you thought it was kind of a lost cause?
Basically.
Okay.
That's where I was at.
I see.
And what changed?
What's that?
And what's changed? I mean, if you thought it was a lost cause,
No, I thought I ran out of time. I didn't know, and then I reached out Monday, the next possible day that you guys were open, and kind of set the ball rolling as to see if I still had a leg to stand on. It wasn't that anything changed. It was just, I was still, within the 10 days, I was still reaching out to you guys, so. Nothing changed.
Any other questions from members of the board?
So what notice were you given at the original outcome of the meeting?
I wasn't given anything. It was just,
They made a decision?
That's it,
And then said, see you later? And
I went out and talked to the animal control, and they said that I would be getting the email, and I never did, and so I called Brian Reed, and that was, he said, I sent it to you, but I'm gonna reissue it to you, resend it to you, which was the 21st.
I see.
So I never got any finding that day, or it's just him saying to me that the conditions imposed, that's what it was. There was no paper or anything.
Okay.
I guess I would ask, I mean, if you're being sort of really honest with yourself, if you think that things will be much different if you have another hearing.
I do.
So you feel like if you...
Yeah, I do, because I have witnesses in the neighborhood that would go against what they had said. And I didn't have a chance to get those people because I didn't know what I was going to the police station for.
I have another question. How did you know to go to the police station? What kind of
They
note?
sent out a letter. They actually pulled my brother over. They thought it was me. They pulled my brother over and handed him a paper that said, show up. He had no clue, so he called the police, and they said, it's about a dog hearing. That's all we can tell you. Something to do with your dogs. And he said, I don't have dogs. It must be my brother. And so I didn't get a paper. I just went to the police station because they had pulled him over, saying he needed to be there.
So you don't know what was on the paper that they handed him?
No.
so according to the documentation we have from Captain Reed, you showed up for the original hearing.
Yeah.
But you just said you knew nothing about the original hearing, and then it got rescheduled. And the only way you would know about the original hearing...
My brother got pulled over for it. We didn't show up for the original one. They canceled it.
So how did you know about the original one?
I didn't know until it got canceled. I know
But you
about
showed
the one
up
they
for it.
pulled. No, not for the original one.
What was the date?
The second meeting is the one that I showed
And what
up
was
for.
that date, the second meeting?
I think it was the 17th or the 16th.
Of 16th, okay. Because the first one,
Was like the 26th or something.
Of October.
And that got canceled.
okay. And then you
But you
did
said
show up for
you didn't know about
second.
the October 26th meeting?
No.
But you showed up for it?
No. Nobody showed up for that one. It got canceled.
Well, according to Captain Reed, you showed up for the original hearing and stated that you received the notice, and you were unhappy that the hearing had been rescheduled.
I don't recall that. I didn't go to the first meeting. I don't believe anybody did.
So, you know, I think it really comes down to when you look at the question of notice, that when, you know, it's a 10-day opportunity, it did fall during Thanksgiving, and he did, you know, get the email. He, you know, he had really a day and a half to be able to respond. That would have negated this problem if he had responded on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Or 12 days later, if we actually had a written appeal late. But we don't have that either.
I think I'm focused on the decision was issued on the 16th, so you'll have the 26th to submit a written request for appeal. So that was 10 days, but it fell during Thanksgiving and the weekend. So that took out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I'm not sure, probably not Monday though, right?
Well, I don't know that any of them are taken out, actually. I mean, that's.
It could have been an email,
sort
is
of
what you're saying.
That's an assertion, but I
Yeah.
don't know that that has any legal basis.
Yeah, no, I know, I'm just looking at it practically.
Especially when he was instructed he could send it by email.
Yeah.
It just said a written letter. I didn't know.
I'm reading the email to you, sir, that says that you can send it via email. That's from Captain Reed to you.
So, can I just read this original
Doug?
letter? It says, this is from Captain Brian Reed. Hello, Diane. Yes, Mr. Jelinski was provided a copy of the appellate instructions in his original notice packet, which was mailed on October 10th, attached for your convenience. We did not receive a return receipt, but we know that he did receive the packet because he showed up for the original hearing date and stated that he received the notice and was unhappy that the hearing had been rescheduled. On November 21st, he called me to inquire about the appeal process. He stated that he lost the instructions. I explained the process to him and sent it to him in writing again at an email address that he provided. I CC'd the Board of Selectmen in that email and will forward you a copy of that following this email. As you will see in that email, I was very clear to him that he needed to submit his request for an appeal in writing and that it must be received by November 26, 2017. I also provided him with the email address for the Board of Selectmen so that he could submit his written request via email due to the holiday. So it sounds like he was trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
And then the next email says, "Hello, Ryan, thank you for calling today. I'm attaching copies of the notice. As you can see, the document does not indicate if it's 10 business days or 10 calendar days. So I strongly recommend that you get notice in writing to them very soon of your intent to request an appeal. You may reference this email as your verification of the decision date. You may email the Board of Selectmen at selectmen@falmouthmass.us."
That's what Mr. Johnson
Right.
Staub referenced. Megan?
No, I was just gonna say, I can understand the confusion about days, except that he says, he did tell you you will have until November 26th to submit a written request. It's in that email that, that Doug was just reading. So I think he, you know, I think Captain Reed was really clear about the date that you needed to get it in by. He gave
The
you the
date,
email.
the only thing I got misunderstood was the written request. I thought I had to actually write you guys a request.
Says-
That's the only thing I misunderstood. That's it.
Is there anyone who wants to make a motion about this appeal request?
It's kind of hard to know without knowing what the severity of the situation was.
Yeah,
Well, it's not really about the facts right now. It's really about whether the appeal process, you know, was noticed. And it certainly, as Doug Jones mentioned, there were, you know, there were several opportunities, and then a final, very, you know, I think maybe the third written instruction that, you've got to get the email to the Board of Selectmen before the 26th. And as Mr. Johnson Staub mentioned, you really, can include all of those dates, so.
I think we've clarified that we are within our purview and our right to deny this request, but I'm also curious as to the whole process. I guess I'm a little anxious about if we're unfairly possibly sentencing a dog to death.
We're not, that was.
And we're not there yet, I understand.
And that was within the police jurisdiction, that's not our jurisdiction.
Exactly.
Our jurisdiction is just the proper appeal, and the question here is, was the terms of the appeal process received? It seems like it was, and with respect to those circumstances, are there any grounds to allow an appeal of that, of the decision based upon an extension, really, of the time that's supposed to be within the filing period?
I guess one question as to whether these emails are actually getting to Mr. Jelinski or not. Because if we're basing it all simply on the email and he's not getting the emails.
Well, he agreed he did that when he said when he received it, he just didn't think that there was time to do it, and that it was too big a process.
Another reason I'd be a little leery about granting the appeal is I do feel it often gives expectation that then they're going to get a different decision. And
I don't expect that. I just want to have my side heard. That's it.
well, I assume that your side was heard. You got a chance to speak at the.
Right.
But it's another reason we could have considered an appeal is if he felt he didn't get a chance to speak. But I don't think that's what you're claiming, is that you didn't get a chance to say your side.
I didn't have any witness testimony. They had 13 people, and I didn't have one. When I could have easily got 10 people in my neighborhood that feed my dogs, pet my dogs, let their kids pet my dogs, but I didn't have that opportunity. That's all.
I don't think.
Question of timely filed is really what we're looking at in terms of our agenda today. Megan, didn't mean to cut you off, bringing the focus back.
Right, I just don't think that I understand that there maybe was some confusion about the writing piece of it, but I think that Captain Reed was really clear about that it could be sent via email, and that it had to be by the 26th. I will say, on Mr. Jaglinski's behalf, he certainly was trying to figure out what was going on, because he was contacting Town Hall and Captain Reed quite a bit, so I don't get the feeling that he just totally didn't care what happened and blew the whole thing off. So that's, I think that notice is good. I don't think that there's a problem with notice here.
So are you making a motion to deny this appeal request because it's based on notice?
If we're basing the request on notice, I don't think there's a problem with it, so I guess I would move to deny the request.
Second.
Is there any more discussion?
Unfortunate, but it does seem like Mr. Reed did the best he could with reaching out and saying it could be emailed. I don't know how much more helpful he could have been as far as that.
I'm going to call for the vote then. All those in favor of denying the appeal request, vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Unfortunately.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Next, we have a request for a sign variance for water station locations, refill, reuse, Falmouth. I know, Doug, you have background on this. Do you want to present it?
Well,
introduce,
Robinson is the lead. I'm just want to disclose that I'm a member on the board of Falmouth Water Stewards.
Yep.
And I don't have any financial interest in it, and none of us do.
Loves clean water. Loves clean water. Oh, great. Great, we'll pass them out. Thanks. Appreciate that.
But this was Alan's idea. He brought this from Philadelphia, and he was good enough to share it with us. And we got very interested very quickly, and we're very happy that he's done that.
Thanks, Doug, and thank you all for this opportunity. I think during the course of the last several months, I've had a chance to talk to almost all of you a little bit about this. Really, it's kind of based on a global problem and a local problem, looking at, focused on seeing a global problem, but finding a way to act locally and actually make a difference.
Be sure to use the microphone.
Oh, thanks.
Lift it up
Thanks,
a little
Doug.
bit.
Thanks, Doug. And I'm representing the Falmouth Water Stewards. I'm a member of the board, as is Doug and as is Sherry Holdren here as well. And Sherry's our co-president. And the idea we came with is to bring water bottle refill stations to the town of Falmouth with a water quality goal of reducing the use of plastic bottles, of reducing roadside and waterway litter, of which we have plenty, including single-use plastic water bottles, improve the health of coastal and marine environment, and inspire residents and visitors to refill and reuse. And the concept is a water station as shown here. This is the model that was used in Philadelphia, which I'm familiar with, being involved in an initiative that was, again, a nonprofit there, in this case the rowing community, working with the city departments, water, parks, and public works. And these water stations, they're 5 feet tall, they're a foot wide, or 3 inches or so thick. They have taps on either side, a lower one and a higher one for refilling water bottles. It has a conventional drinking water fountain or bubbler, but the beauty of this one is it's wheelchair accessible. It sticks out kind of far, but it's wheelchair accessible. And at the base, as you can see, it's a little hard to visualize there, but you can see the dog. The model we're choosing has a water basin for dogs. They have paneling on the side for messaging and for custom messaging. And they're brushed stainless steel, they're heavy-duty plastic. They've been in Philadelphia now for 2 years. They only operate during the non-winter months, just as we'll have to do here because of freezing. We have looked at a number of locations throughout the town conceptually. We've got an idea of, for the town centers, the business districts, the bikeway, recreation facilities, town beaches, athletic fields, harborfront. Funding, we aren't coming to you and asking you for money. We have made a commitment to raise the funds through sponsorship from businesses, private citizens, community organizations, and hopefully grants from county, state, and federal sources. We were very fortunate in that we received our first grant from the Falmouth Road Race, and we received that in December. Really importantly, it's a partnership that we're proposing. We can raise money, and we can promote ideas. We're not construction folks. Are we? Oh, actually, some of us are, but that's not what we do as a board. And so we very early, back in July, approached Steve Rafferty, the town water supervisor, who would be here with me today, co-presenting, except he's sort of on vacation in California or Arizona or somewhere. I can't understand why. In any case, we've worked with Steve in terms of the feasibility of these. He and we met with Julian and with Director of Public Works, and the town is committed to install these for us, using staff forces, and to take ownership of them once installed, and of course provide Falmouth water to these, so that the folks in Falmouth who are using these can use Falmouth water as opposed to Maine water or,
Right.
or water from any place else.
A quick question.
Yes.
So when you're talking about sponsorships and the fact that these can be messaging, are you talking about putting ads all over these?
No, we're not.
Good.
And I'll show you what we're talking about with this. It's just
Great.
when
And
we,
the
as
other
we
thing I
move
want to get
further.
to is, what if one of these is in a historic area? I know you met with those folks as well.
We've met with the historic district, and I'll get to that part of the conversation, because that's the important, getting to the crux of what we're asking you to approve. We've considered 2 locations for starters, in part because the Falmouth Road Race is donated the funds for this. We thought that the location at the finish line of the road race, although this would not be adequate for servicing 12,000 or so runners, but the 12,000 or so runners would see this.
Right.
But of course, the people who use the ball field, who use the beach, who are running and biking and walking through the community here would be able to use it. And the location we've picked there, we've worked with Steve on that. We've also worked with the Heights and Mara Vista Neighborhood Association, and they're very much supportive of this in general, and that location as being really the best location.
Great forethought and great community outreach.
The second location where we wanted to start with, of course, is right here in town at the Peg Noonan Park. And we talked with, we've been out there with Julian and Ray and Steve. And we originally picked a location closer to the sidewalk. The Historic Commission thought they would like it a little bit further back. As much as I kind of fought for it being closer to the sidewalk, we're open to having it further back. These are meant to be seen. And we recognize that it's a historic district, but it's a very dynamic historic district with the shops that we have. And some of these shops are quite modern. And these aren't meant to kind of blend in with the scenery, because there is, because we want people to want to use them. And we too want them to use the message, because there's much, the sum is even greater than the parts. So this is, of course, in the historic district. And here's a shot looking, the building behind us is the restrooms. And so we're looking to be close to that backyard. It's important that these can be accessed by folks with disabilities. So we'll be Steve will be working with landscaping and so forth in mind. But we anticipate it being right next to the sidewalk here. And just a couple of shots. You really can't read this at the scale we're at, but there is instructions on how to use, and there's messaging on here. We like the blue because it stands out. Water is blue. We considered cranberry because of the town school colors, but we were convinced that we should keep water blue and not cranberry colored. This is the messaging that we intend to have, our draft messaging. That we want to keep it we want to keep it simple, we want to keep it brief, but we want to make it to the point. So this is the front panel, the side that has the water fountain on it. We start with "Have a drink on us," and of course the font will be different. And we are employing a commercial designer, a professional designer, so that what we have will look good font-wise and so forth. Have a drink on us, fill your bottles here, and be a water steward. The Falmouth Water Stewards, and the question that you asked about advertising or messaging about the donor, this is all we intend to have. The Falmouth Water Stewards in the town of Falmouth are grateful to the Falmouth Road Race, in this case, for their generous support of this water station. And this would be in roughly 3 or 4 inch high panel immediately above the fountain. So if you're using the fountain, yes, you would see it. And the logo of the road race or any other organization that makes a donation, whether it's a private or whether it's a business or other, we would have it. It wouldn't be an outsize size, wouldn't be any larger than Falmouth Water Stewards or the town of Falmouth. The front panel, the bottom will have the logo of Refill Reuse Falmouth, which I had in their first slide. And at the very bottom, we'll have a little arrow pointing to, dogs drink here or something to that effect. The back panel will have a brief statement about the Falmouth Water Stewards. And below that will be a water steward, use refillable water bottles, help reduce roadside litter and plastics in the oceans. Thank you, and an image of the Earth from space or something to that effect. One thing I didn't mention when I was just looking at the structures themselves, another element to it is there's a dry well. So the water that isn't consumed goes into a dry well beneath the concrete slab. And of course, we live in a place where infiltration works very, very well. So there will not be an issue with water on the surface. Doug, anything you'd like to add that I may have missed, or any questions?
So one of the concerns that the Historic District Commission had, or Historic Commission I should say, was the appearance of it in winter and they had asked how we would cover it, and we subsequently came up with the idea of a canvas cover to minimize the size and effect of it. A wooden cover was just getting too big, so we got rid of that idea. Steve has agreed to make it a regular trip out there in the fall to winterize, which is pretty simple. You just shut off the water and it self-drains down, and then turn them on in the spring. And we've offered to just keep an eye on them in case there's a lot of leaves in the dog bowl, simple wiping off of, kind of cleaning and maintenance, just on a volunteer basis.
Is it a, like, graffiti resistant
It is.
surface?
It is.
That's what I
Yeah,
thought.
it is. And in fact, the ones in Philadelphia through a contract that the Schuylkill Navy, the rowing community organization, had with the water department, I actually maintained them. The 4 in Philadelphia, which was Philadelphia's pilot program, for the first 3 months, to give them an assessment of what it took to maintain the cleanliness of them. And I found that you can remove, they're designed, the panels are graffiti proof, and it doesn't mean that graffiti doesn't get on them if someone tries, but it comes off.
It's great we have someone with exact experience, so that's pretty cool. Anybody else have any questions? Doug?
You'd mentioned the 2, but in our packet is the third one mentioned. Is that still a possibility of the
The
depot?
third, well, there's a third and then more. The next location where we'd like to have one, when we raise additional funds, would be along the bikeway.
Right.
And we've discussed with, we've met with a lot of committees, and certainly the design committee, who responded very positively to this, and to an historic committee, but recreation and bikeways and solid waste.
Well, I want to thank you. We did have to delay you to let the Historic Commission read in on it, so we appreciate that opportunity. Doug?
And when we found out that the Historic Commission was going to review the Peg Noonan Park, we thought we should have a backup, and that's why we added a third one to the package. But subsequently, we've spoken with the Bikeways Committee, and they feel that there's other places on the bike path that would be more urgent, like at North Falmouth at the end of the bike path, or Old Dock Road. Those are 2 higher priorities, so if it's feasible, we'd probably prefer the Peg Noonan if the board
In our
approves it.
preference is really Peg Noonan, because we really want to make, from a water quality standpoint, as big an impact as we can. We are hoping, we talked with Julian about this, when we launch these, we want to make it an event. If we can get your approval tonight, that event can probably be in June, and that's what we're shooting for.
The other reason it'd be really nice if one of these first 2 were at Peg Noonan Park is, well, we feel like the Falmouth Road Race is probably going to be around for a long time, and to have their logo on a Main Street location would be preferable than a business that may be, not as long-lived as the road race.
Well, I think this is really a big conversation that the water stewards have been, working on for a long time. And this is a real, magnet in terms of centering that discussion, both with the announcement, the interaction and coordination that you've done with all these committees and village associations and groups, and that it really kind of, I think bumps up the profile of this, very crucial mandate here, just to reuse and just be careful of the water. And, it's something we're working on so many different levels, and this just, puts it right up front. I really like that part.
Well, right now, it's all about making people aware of reducing ocean plastics.
Yeah.
We have a Skip the Straw program. I'm sure you've probably seen or heard about that.
Yep.
And on Thursday at the library at 7 p.m., we're having a talk on ocean plastics by Karen Lavender Law, who's at Sea Education. And, we really have to develop awareness of this problem. And it starts on land and ends up in the sea.
Absolutely. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve I guess it's a sign variance is what we're really approving in the locations. It is taking us back to where I remember growing up, where we had 2 water fountains, one on the library lawn and one at the Village Green.
Right.
Yeah. Nice. Who's seconded? Megan? Or Deputy Malone? All those in favor? Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll be in touch when we're ready for the the christening. And we've already talked to one of the businesses in town who's interested in selling bottles, water bottles with their logo, our logo, the town's logo, if the town would like to have their logo on it. And Madam Chairman, I think we'll give you one as part of the celebration to bring with you to your meetings.
Oh, God, I appreciate that, thanks. We'll rotate. Thanks so much. Great job. You have to come to the microphone, but
Thank you.
certainly.
I'm very loud and I don't need to be on TV.
Oh, yeah, you do.
It's for the television.
I know. Cheryl Holdren, I just want to say we want to thank you very, very much for approving this tonight because we are ready to go and we've been waiting for this and this is fantastic. And thank you, Doug.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Alan is an amazing person who did this.
Great support. Great support.
Thanks for all of you championing this. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Next request for a sign variance is an off-premise promotional sign for the Falmouth Rotary Club Pancake Breakfast, which we've done many times before.
I move approval of the Masonic Lodge, TD Bank, 7-Eleven, and the parking lot across from Coffee Obsession.
My second, it's on June 9th from 8 to 12.
Thanks, I was struggling looking for that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great. Next, we have a request for a sign variance for an off-premise promotional sign Falmouth Commodores baseball clinics.
I move approval of their Commodores signs on the 13 locations that they've given us.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Waited all that time. Thank you for coming, though. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Next, I want to tee up Mr. Johnson Staub, who's been really doing a supreme job consolidating and displaying in the, most available way we can the information that we've already collected from the live survey follow-up. Peter?
Thank you. Yeah, we have now posted an update to the executive summary and the verbatim to incorporate all of the written comments we received after the live survey event, which was held on February 2nd. And again, for the audience at home, the live survey was essentially a community forum that was designed to get community members to come and speak to one another, as well as offer their ideas for the Board of Selectmen to hear and to consider. And it was designed not as a thorough discussion of any one or two particular issues, but more along the lines of a brainstorming session, I would say. So now we are at the stage of saying what's next and how do we follow up, and bearing in mind that what was elicited at the event were ideas for further consideration, not mandates or conclusions. We took a look at the various ideas and offer some thoughts as to what the board may want to consider for some next steps. So to begin with, in the short term, there was one very concrete idea that came out of the survey. We had actually heard it here before the live survey event, and that was to post the meeting packets. Megan referenced that earlier tonight, and that has been initiated as of a couple of months ago.
And I just have to recognize Mark Finneran for having suggested that in 1925 or something.
Another idea that came up was to hold another live survey that is more focused on a particular topic or two topics. And I'll just run through these four and then perhaps allow the board to discuss them. The third one was to increase use of social media to inform the community of news and events, or I should say to better use social media, because it has been used by several departments for some time now. And then lastly, to consider an online survey to assess interests and modes of communication and participation.
On the social media, I just want to mention that Michael Palmer has already been in touch with one of the folks, younger folks, who spoke at the live survey and offered some assistance in that regard. So a lot of these suggestions that we talked about, kind of categorizing whether it was something that could be fairly simple and immediate, or something that sort of was a middle time frame discussion, or something that really should, be looked at and planned for the future. So some of the smaller items, like you mentioned, the packet going to the public, and, the social media element, at least with Mr. Palmer, a lot of these things are already rolling. So I want to just recognize the action of the board. We have a Coastal Resilience Action Committee. Well, we've kind of taken on, things that can be moved, we're acting to move them. What are the board's thoughts on the suggestions by Mr. Johnson-Staub?
I'd love to get some more social media going. I really like the way the Falmouth Police and the Fire Department have interacted, and it seems to really be working well. And they really put out a ton of information. Every time there's a storm, the police are telling, watch out for this road, there's a tree down. And if you, I don't know how many people use Facebook, but you can choose to see posts first from a particular organization. So I have that set on my Facebook. So I get those notices from the Falmouth Police all the time. It's really helpful, and I think we should expand on it.
Great.
I would say, just, having another live survey that's maybe, does have sort of a different focus, so not repeating exactly what we've already done, although we've talked about sort of doing another one so that, folks who go away for the winter can participate, or folks who are just here for the summer, but are certainly part of the valued part of the community can participate. But I think not to just kind of repeat the same exercise, but to think about how we can structure the conversation in a way that kind of elicits new ideas or new information, or individuals who, maybe weren't excited about participating in a general sense or drawn to it. So I like the idea of just that creating, you talk about sort of when you're an athlete, like you have muscle memory and you just do it. So making communication something that's kind of that muscle memory that we have, that we do it so regularly, whether it's 3 times a year or even twice a year or whatever it is, that it's a regular thing that people know how to participate, want to participate, think about deeper ways that they can participate. So I think before we let this go too long, to do it, have this exercise again, maybe in a slightly different, with a slightly different twist to it.
I would change the format this next time. I think this first one was great, but maybe to do it breaking up into smaller sessions or smaller groups. And so instead of 40 people or 100 people sitting in a room, maybe we have 20 people and one of us, and 20 people and it can be a little more of a conversation, a dialogue. Still trying to listen, but an exchange of ideas. Just to try something that's different.
What comes to mind with that is, we're talking about the summer period, so the schools aren't usually very busy, almost like each classroom could have a sign, whatever, if you want to talk about infrastructure, roadways, or, here, and then on another focus, if you want to talk about, some kind of, long-term, whatever, dig deeper into the fields, or, that were just raised by the rec committee. Does that fit with what you're suggesting?
Or maybe, we pick some subject matter, it doesn't have to be very narrow, but, and then we have some of those discussion groups about that particular subject matter. So you're kind of having that little bit more intense discussion, but around one topic. So instead of having, 10 groups report in about 10 different subjects that maybe get us, at a superficial or somewhat, deeper but still kind of superficial level, if we had 10 groups that were kind of reporting back about, their discussions around a particular subject matter, it might get us a little, so I don't know, I'm just thinking of ways that can be done in the future.
Doug?
I think it'll be good to do that. We're going to have to be careful, though, that I think we should try to tackle as much of this as we can, at least address it. We can't do all of this stuff, but at least address it in our meeting and just check off the boxes and say, this is something we can do, this is something we may not be able to do before we get to summer, so we don't give people the sense that they might be just, giving us input and no result. I want to make sure we have results before we do the next one.
What I think the next step might be, in terms of for the board to consider, is that, Megan and I took the lead on this initial step, maybe if someone else wants to volunteer with Mr. Johnson Staub, it does take a lot of lead time and a lot of planning, and if we're shooting for summer, I mean, just
gonna be
really
soon.
coordinating the place and, you know, kind of the scope. It'd be great if.
I'll help with the next round.
Would Doug, that would be great.
Okay.
Maybe if we can think about, I'd have to go back to sort of the results that were put together, but maybe we can take a look at folks' comments and sort of pull maybe, I know we had talked about, you know, the idea of thinking about a sense of place, you know, and sort of revisiting that exercise that was done a while ago. So maybe we can think a little bit more about how if we kind of want to get to that greater conversation about a sense of place, you know, what's the town mean to us, where do we want it to be in the future, maybe we can, you know, look at kind of what that next step is in getting to that broader discussion. So if these are kind of incremental steps to get to that broader discussion where we're able to have that kind of whatever we produce from it, some written document or whatever.
So I'm hearing you volunteering with Doug.
I'm the one who always liked to do other people's homework in school. I was that student, so just not my own. So anything that keeps me from doing my own stuff.
Would you mind that
What?
if Megan assisted?
No, more help the better.
Sam, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm trying to differentiate what you're suggesting from our committees that we have that are already focused on certain areas, right? And so I like the idea of the sense of place, because I feel like one thing we've lacked a bit, it's come out in a lot of our joint meetings, is this overall review of what the town should be like or what we want it to be like. I really think that's worth dedicating a session to, and hoping that we can actually seed that discussion with some examples of other communities around New England or wherever, you know, just to help people say, I like this, but I don't want this. But sometimes, you know, we live in ignorance, so to speak. You know, we've got what we think is great, but we might actually like something else even more if we knew that there was an alternative.
It seems like that might probably be a collaboration with the planning board then?
Well, I agree with you, because, I mean, if we're looking at an overall vision, then it ought to be incorporated in our planning documents, including our strategic plan. So anyway, in trying to think of what you're just discussing, that's the question I'm asking. And I hope that our ongoing committees that do so much hard work will participate in this activity, so that we can get all their thinking that they've had, you know, stewing along and distilling for the last, some of them, 20 years.
And that's a good point. I mean, because the model that we started with, the listening session, which is, you know, we already, you know, come from the position of, you know, the board as a policymaker, and it allowed us an opportunity to just hear where folks were with the current state. I mean, in a sense, what you're saying is we would partner with the other committees so that they also would have the opportunity to listen to where folks felt they were, you know, and so that could be part of the structure. And, you know, kind of also models what we already do with the joint sessions and, you know, now, which are going on without us, actually, in various committees, which is a great thing.
Yes, indeed.
Any other thoughts before we kind of launch this?
Further list?
Great. Mr. Johnson Staub, your thoughts on that?
That sounds great. No, so
whatever it was that we all just said.
What I'm hearing is we're gonna plan a second live survey to address a sense of place, sort of a visioning exercise, and I'll be working with Megan and Doug on that.
And it'll be during a period when we, you know, off-season or rather in season.
Right.
So there'll be a fuller opportunity for folks who are only here then to, you know, to give feedback.
Right. So that answers a lot of it, and then perhaps at a future meeting, the board can look at some of the other long-term possibilities and whether you want to move forward on any of those.
Great.
And I can certainly work with Doug as well regarding his suggestion on responding to the full laundry list of ideas that were raised at the live survey.
Right.
No, I think that's a, you know, that's part of what our initial goal was, so moving that forward. Appreciate you keeping us on task.
Yeah.
Great. Great. Next, we have an update on the RFP process for Liberty Green. And Frank, I apologize. I had a thought of bumping this up to the time when you spoke earlier, and I lost it, so I just kept it on the agenda at the same time. Sorry to keep you so late.
It's okay. Been interesting watching the meeting tonight.
What, don't you usually do it on TV?
Yeah, come on.
All the time. The Liberty Green RFP, let me just give a little context to this, because I think it's deserving of it. Back at the November town meeting, there was Article 25, which was a petition article from Mr. Finneran to take by eminent domain the property owned by the Fay family on Main Street at the intersection of Lantern Lane, where there is a proposed Chapter 40B affordable housing development that has been approved by the Board of Appeals. It's under appeal at the Housing Appeals Committee. The Board of Selectmen made a recommendation of indefinite postponement on that article because we know that the town is not allowed to use its power of eminent domain to take property that is subject to a 40B a 40B comprehensive permit for affordable housing. It had been tried in another community. The Supreme Judicial Court said no, it's not a valid exercise of the power of eminent domain, and they voided the taking of eminent domain. So there was an amendment made to the floor, from the floor to that article, which authorized the Board of Selectmen to negotiate a purchase of the same property from the owner and the developer, and also appropriated a sum of $100,000, which was to be used for due diligence that the town may incur in trying to negotiate a purchase of this property. And the amendment passed. So we then are in a situation where the town has been authorized to negotiate a purchase of the property, and if that's all you look at, you think, well, it's a very simple procedure. We just go out and contact the owner and say, we'd like to buy it, and can we negotiate it? But that's not how it works. We can't actually do that. A town is subject to Chapter 30B, which is called the Uniform Procurement Act, and it directs how a community procures a number of things, goods, services, and real estate. And there are specific functions that must be performed, and there are specific procedures that must be obeyed. So we immediately started researching the Uniform Procurement Act, and we came to the conclusion that we would have to comply with it, but none of the exceptions would necessarily apply to our situation. But Mr. Suso, the town manager, and I decided that we would contact the Inspector General. The Inspector General is tasked with enforcing the Uniform Procurement Act, and we did. And we did this on a couple of occasions, and we had a couple of telephone conversations with them. And the end of the communication with the Inspector General was we were directed to comply with Chapter 30B, which is the Uniform Procurement Act, which basically says we cannot directly negotiate with the owner or development of the property until we have complied with Chapter 30B. Now, we do not have a great deal of experience implementing Chapter 30B on real estate purchases in town. We have purchased a lot of property, but the exemptions have applied to most of them. For example, you can acquire open space without complying with Chapter 30B. That's one of the exemptions. You can also, but this isn't open space, this is developed property. You can also purchase unique property without complying with the Uniform Procurement Act. Now, unique property basically means only this parcel will do. There's no other parcel that will suit your needs. Well, it turns out that in the affordable housing context, there's no such thing as unique property because it can go anywhere in town. Under Chapter 40B, the Board of Appeals can put affordable housing in commercial and residential and any other district in town, so there's no such thing as unique property. So we then set out to comply with Chapter 30B, and the first requirement is that we attain an appraisal. So Mr. Suso arranged for an appraisal, and we had that done. It's all on file, and we know what the appraiser says the property is worth. So the next step is to prepare what's called a request for proposals. And we have to prepare, and we actually have prepared, a request for proposals for land upon which we're going to build affordable housing. And we think it's the intent of town meeting that this property, if it is to be acquired by the town, be used for affordable housing. Now, in this request for proposal, we cannot specify the specific property. We have to put out a general request for proposals, and multiple owners and developers must be able to respond. And when we receive the proposals in response to this request, we then have a procedure that's set out in the request for proposals to evaluate the proposals, select a proposal that we want to continue to negotiate with, and then negotiate a purchase of the property from the developer or the owner. That is, again, not the end of it, because the town meeting article in November didn't appropriate any money to buy the property. So if we have a deal with the developer owner for this particular property, we will have to then go before a town meeting and seek the funding to purchase it. We presently don't know how much the purchase price is going to be. We'll learn that if we get a proposal submitted. Now, Mr. Suso has drafted the request for proposals. It's pretty much in final form. He's had a couple of meetings in the last week or so with Jennifer Petit and myself, and we've gone over the language and we've kind of refined it to the point where it's basically ready to go. So I think the plan at the present time is to issue the request for proposals probably either late this week or early next, and then request that the proposals be submitted at some time in May. And I don't think Mr. Suso has actually identified the date, but it will be sometime in May. The way it works is the proposal is opened in public, just like if it's a bid. And then there's a process where we go through, where we evaluate the proposals and select the one we want to go to negotiate, and then go into the negotiation phase. So we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. And if this is successful and we do wind up with a proposal from the owner-developer of this property, and we can negotiate a successful contract, we'd probably be looking at town meeting approval in November, which means it'd be a closing sometime in late 2018, early 2019. If we acquire the property, we then have another task, which is very daunting, and that is to try and identify what we want to use the property for and prepare an appropriate request for proposals, which now we will submit as a town to a developer to come in and take over and develop the property. Now, I know there had been some discussion at the November town meeting that maybe we could put a building similar to the one at 704 Main Street that the Falmouth Housing Corporation developed. Well, maybe that's possible. I'm not saying it is or it isn't. But these are all decisions that the board will have to be making at some time in the future. And we're going to undertake the process to see if we can acquire the rights to do this. But it all started because of a proposal to take it by eminent domain, which kind of was a non-starter, but it was kept alive by the suggestion that we negotiate a purchase. The Inspector General has instructed us to go through the request for proposals, which we have done, and there's where we are.
And there's a possibility we would not have to go to the town for a ballot question on the, we could do the purchase and sale?
Well, if, I don't know what the financial situation looks like, but if you know, the sufficient, as they say, available cash or certified free cash to buy it, we could do that. And I said, I don't know how much this is going to cost. I imagine the developer is going to be looking not only for the cost of the land, but to recover the cost that he's put into it too. So it's probably going to be more than our appraisal, but we're going to deal with that when it happens.
Okay. Perhaps, Madam Chair, if I could just interject.
Yes.
You know, again, this is just pure conjecture, and I certainly concur with Town Council Duffy. Given some relative insight based on appraisals, which obviously the appraisal is still privileged, not available publicly, and given our normal protocol on large purchases, large sums, expenditures of large sums of money, I would say the likelihood is significant that we would need to be considering a debt exclusion. which if we went forward to town meeting in November, could be scheduled the following May.
Thank you for that important process note. And, you know, I just really want to say, since the last town meeting, when the mandate was put by town meeting to the selectmen to lay a path here, you know, it really has been a very complicated and extremely time-consuming road with a lot of dedication and expertise by a number of folks. And, you know, I just want, you know, to thank you all for the, you know, the numbers of meetings and really the tremendous amount of research to get this very complicated process right. And I appreciate the fact that the board was able to receive a report now, so that when we do go to town meeting will know that we have moved the mandate forward as requested. So that's really a huge goal accomplished, and I want to thank the town manager for leading that effort. Are there any questions for Mr. Duffy?
Is there actually any possibility of doing a vote in November? Since it's a major, I mean, we do have an election in November this year, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, we do.
And so couldn't we, if we wanted to, and time things correctly, or is it only if we put the town meeting?
No, you
in
still have an
October?
election in May anyway, so.
Well,
No.
if we-
Oh, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
You can actually, the selectmen could, under certain circumstances, and I don't remember exactly how it works, but you can, in anticipation of an override or a debt exclusion, put the question on the ballot even before you voted.
Vote on town meeting.
I don't think we've ever done it in Falmouth, but I think it's possible.
But since we wouldn't have to declare another election, since we're already.
It would save money.
have election,
Save money.
we-
Yeah.
We could do it a little earlier and not have to. have
It's
the
something
cost.
we could look into, yes.
Great idea. Anyone else have any questions?
But that's a decision you probably have to make in September, because the ballot has to be identified and all the questions have to be submitted for printing several weeks in advance of the election.
Would you just prepare for that? I'm sure there's some research that needs to be
Certainly,
done so
happy
that
to
that
look
would
into
be
that.
an option if we.
I'm just wondering, would we not need a special town meeting in advance of that, Frank?
No, the selectmen can put a question on the ballot before the town meeting if they want. It's not been done, but.
So we'd have it voted on, and town meeting would not have had an opportunity to vote on it?
No.
In advance?
No, when they vote, typically when town meeting votes to acquire property that requires a debt exclusion, it's subject to a later vote.
Right. So you're just
But
gonna-
now, they will vote knowing that the money's available, or it's not.
I can just add, I have experience in other communities where the override vote comes before the town meeting vote, so that it is an option.
I understand it's an option, I just think it's an obstacle that we haven't surmounted in the past. So it would present a little different set of challenges for us.
Or motivation.
A lot of education, I think, would go around it, but,
Yeah,
but, I
absolutely.
mean, obviously, I think, you know, with there's a lot to have go on before we're even at the point
If
of
I
making
might,
that choice.
where I'm coming from is town meeting has put this process in motion.
Right.
So if we vote on it before we go back to town meeting, I think that is significant.
But could we have town meeting late October with the election in?
I think you
first
could,
week
you
of
could have a
November?
special town meeting.
Yeah.
Right. Or even.
Well, you could if you wanted to, but we
Right,
don't.
or in May, we can declare town meeting is going to be, the
In
fall town
October.
meeting is October. We declare when town meeting occurs.
I think that it's by bylaw in November, isn't it?
I don't know.
That's the annual.
I think we've already said it.
Yeah, because you confuse the finance committee with all their deliberations and recommendations, which really start after
So it could
Labor
be
Day.
special.
Right.
There's some options there, no doubt.
That'll be part of the
Thank you.
recommendation. Thank you,
Okay.
Frank.
Thank you,
Great
Frank. It's
report.
very
Thanks for
helpful.
staying so late.
Thank you, Frank.
Much appreciated. Next on the agenda, we have to approve 2017 seasonal, right, typo, sorry, 2018, thanks. Seasonal license renewals. Shuckers, 91 Water Street, Woods Hole, has been taken off the agenda. And otherwise, I'll just read through. I want to also hold the Falmouth Pier 37 Boathouse, 88 Scranton Ave, for all those requests, and we'll go through the balance. So for all alcohol, the first is Falmouth Raw Bar at 56 Scranton Ave. The next is Landfall Restaurant at 9 Luscombe Ave. And the next is Quick's Hole Taqueria at 6 Luscombe Ave.
Move approval?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have All Alcohol Club at Seacoast Shores Association, 7 Farview Lane.
Move approval.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next, we have the Falmouth Raw Bar, 56 Scranton Ave, under Common Victualler. Also Landfall Restaurant, 9 Luscombe Ave, Quick Soul Taqueria, 6 Luscombe Ave, Seacoast Shores Association, 7 Farview Lane.
Move approval.
Would we not include
Second.
Pier 37 for the common victualler?
I'm holding all those.
Okay, for,
Yeah.
not just the liquor, for
Right.
everything, okay.
We just have to vote.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. Next, I have for entertainment, the Falmouth Raw Bar, 56 Scranton Ave, Landfall Restaurant, 9 Luscombe Ave, Quick's Hole Taqueria, 6 Luscombe Ave, Seacoast Shores Association, 7 Farview Lane.
Move approval.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, for Sunday entertainment, I have Falmouth Raw Bar, 56 Scranton Ave, Landfall Restaurant, 9 Luscombe Ave, Seacoast Shores Association, 7 Farview Lane.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the reason that we held the Falmouth Pier 37 Boathouse, 88 Scranton Ave, and I just didn't want to have to delineate whether we were solely talking
Okay.
alcohol or entertainment. There was during the earlier hearing, on a earlier date, there was some interest by the board to wait and give some time and look at the proposed license and to be sure it fit with the status of the restaurant and bar, the Boathouse. And so I guess I'm asking for thoughts on that. As you read the proposed license, for example, the alcoholic beverages, the hours are proposed 11 a.m. to 1 a.m., 6 days, and that all glasses are off the tables and bar, and all patrons out by 1:30 a.m. That's the current condition on that, and it's kind of also reflected in the seasonal common victualler. It's kind of reflected through, but I just wanted to get the board's sense of any other considerations.
Well, if I could, I feel like we really got their attention this year, and I think they have a modified plan that could be successful. I'm kind of inclined to give them a chance to try it one year and see how it goes. They've already said they voluntarily scale things back at midnight, but if they're having a slow week and somebody on a Wednesday, a party of 15 comes in and they want to stay till 12:30, I'd hate to shoot them in the foot. I'd kind of like to give them a chance. It's my feeling.
Anyone else? I see a lot of nods.
That's how I feel. I think, I think I said this before, that, not every day is 4th of July, and so for some of the servers, I think we're gonna know immediately if there continue to be problems, and there are other actions that can be taken by this board, given the hearings that we just went through and the, the sanctions that they have hanging over their head, not just from us, but from the ABCC. So I feel confident that the pressure has been applied appropriately, and that, they have to come before us for a license each year, and so if it doesn't go well, then we'll obviously make a different determination.
Sam?
I think, just to add to that, I don't want to be trying to be punitive. What I think we want to be doing is managing the safety and the following of the law, not serving to minors, for instance, making sure that's managed in a way that it doesn't happen. So I'm quite comfortable with Doug's suggestion.
So does someone want to make a motion?
Then, I'm sorry, unless there's any other comment, I would move approval for,
Sure.
all alcohol restaurant, Falmouth Pier 37 Boathouse, 88 Scranton Avenue. Also for Pier 37 Boathouse, 88 Scranton Avenue for common victualler. And for entertainment, Falmouth Pier 37 Boathouse, 88 Scranton Avenue, as well as for Sunday entertainment license, Falmouth Pier 37 Boathouse, 88 Scranton Avenue.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next on the agenda, we have minutes of meetings, the public session, March 12th.
I would move approval. I didn't see anything unless anyone else did.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Minutes?
Do you
Yeah,
have
I gotta get-
something, Sam?
Yes, page 4, these are relatively minor. Excuse me, so I'm being ready to miss this. And under number 3, if you come down one to the third paragraph, where it says Mr. Patterson asked about, really it was wireless microphones, and then Mr. Johnson Staub said that wireless microphones can be added, but a radio with microphones is not really communicating the idea. We could
So just
that.
change radio with to wireless.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yep. And then on page 5, the last sentence, where it basically says, attend the Cape Cod Selectmen Counselors Association. And in the last sentence says climate change issues, housing production, wastewater initiatives, and rooms occupancy tax were discussed. These were all items that were discussed at that meeting, just to give us a little bit more legibility, readability to that. And then the last one, the statement that somehow implies that there's a 2.75% surtax that's going to be used for wastewater treatment, that's not accurate. So I think basically we could say part of the rooms tax will be used to fund wastewater treatment. That's the proposed. It's proposed that part of the rooms tax will be used to fund wastewater treatment.
And are those all the changes for that date?
I think so, at this point.
Move approval with those changes?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have the executive session for March 12,
I move approval and release.
session 1.
And this is to release, even though this is executive session, because I didn't see anything in here that hasn't been resolved.
Right.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have session 2, the same date, executive session.
I move approval not to release.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the executive session 3 on that date.
Let's see, I'm sorry, I can't, the page is turned.
I'd move approval and do not release. Well, I guess
There's no reason not to
we
release
just
it.
discussed that, right?
Yeah, I'd say that's and release
That we
myself.
can release that.
This is session 3, yeah.
Yep.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have session 4, executive session on that same date, March 12.
Move approval but not release.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then we have executive session 5 on that marathon, March 12 date.
I move approval but not release.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Next, we have individual selectmen's reports. Doug, anything?
Yeah, I had an interesting meeting with Mr. Packer on Martha's Vineyard on Thursday, I guess it was. Just went over there with a couple of Woods Hole residents, members of the SMART group that are interested in learning about New Bedford and Martha's Vineyard. It was strictly just informational. Mr. Packer was very generous with his time, and he was such a nice, welcoming host. And he was telling us about the history of the waterfront and how it's evolved over the years, and the history of his knowledge of New Bedford and how that dynamic has worked. And he was just really, really nice guy. It was very interesting to meet him, and I really enjoyed it. The most important piece of information that he imparted to us, which I had heard this before, but I didn't really take it home as clearly as he put it, that Martha's Vineyard is looking into packaging, drying, packaging their waste in these shrink-wrapped packages about the size of a car, so that they can manage that over the course of the summer and just store it at their packaging facility. There's going to be 2 of them because they want redundancy, because once they start to rely on this, they don't want to have any problems of it breaking down. And so they'll package it all summer, ship it off when they can. Right now, all the trash is coming off loose in trucks, all these 18-wheelers. And it's the equivalent of 20,000 cars, or they call 5 cars equals an 18-wheeler, so if you can do the math by that. So he's very interested to offer his services to use the barge transport to remove the waste. He's very busy with bringing stuff to the vineyard, but not as busy taking stuff back off. So it's a great fit, and that alone would really reduce our traffic. So that's a great initiative and he was very generous to remind me how much the Steamship Authority has helped to facilitate that, because there's been some, disagreement as to how the process should fall on the vineyard, and Mr. Sayers has been implementing all his efforts to try to move it forward, because it's in their interest as well. So that was really a great meeting. On Saturday, I attended the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness along with Mr. Suso, and I know, Sue, you were there. And I was very encouraged. That was a great meeting and great sharing of ideas. And I think it was the most broadly shared ideas of any of the forums that I've attended. So we took a lot of information and shared a lot of information, and the end result was very interesting. We all, 4 different groups, we all came to a lot of the same conclusions, but we had some different ideas. And one idea that came up at our group, Andrew Ashton from the Coastal Resiliency Action Committee, just sort of out of the blue said, we ought to have signs along the roadways on the coast say, do you like this road? Enjoy it now, because in 2025 it's going to be gone. That would really raise awareness of where we're headed with these roadways and the need to pay attention to the situation. So just one of many ideas. So that was the highlights of my week.
That's great. Sam?
Well, I'm going to have a short report. I actually attended the Finance Committee and the school committee. Only got to listen to one of the candidates be interviewed, and was, very impressed. Didn't know what the other 2 were, because I had to go to a CPC meeting to sit in on that one. But basically, everybody's been working through CPC and Finance Committee in preparation for town meetings. So nothing particular that I want to raise that would be of significant interest to you.
Megan?
No, just to regardless of people's opinions or politics, I went to the event that was organized by the students on Saturday around gun safety, and I was just so impressed by our students here who were, able to put this together, and were really eloquent and compelling in the things that they said. And as always, really impressed and thankful for the Falmouth Police Department that, our chief is at these events, and I know he had a lot of officers there just to make sure that both, everything was safe, as well as traffic continued to flow around that important part of town. So big thanks to them, and a lot of appreciation for students who are, just making themselves heard. So it's a good event.
And, kind of the irony that such a tragic event has so motivated young folks, and I think really, possibly an upside could be to just continue that level of interest. And it was very crowded. I mean, the Village Green was packed.
Yeah.
And hardly any green in the Village
Yeah,
Green.
exactly.
Doug? Mr. Johnson-Staub?
All set.
Mr. Suso, Town Manager's report.
Thank you. Happy spring. That's no further report.
We hope.
Well then, I guess I'm ready for a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nestled in a classic New England setting, amid 200-year-old elm trees and charming colonial homes, stately sea captains' homes, and charming Cape Cod salt boxes, Shoreway Acres is a graceful blend of Cape Cod's past and present. Shoreway Acres, proud sponsor of Falmouth Community Television.
Hi, I'm Pat Thatcher.
And I'm Margaret Gifford, and we're from Sotheby's International Realty in Falmouth.
So, Margaret, what do we say to people when they ask, should I list my house in the fall or the winter?
The inventory is very low, and your house will be much more apparent.
This is true. And also, remember, buyers are looking 24/7, 365 now.
97% of you are looking on the internet.
So when you have real estate questions,
We're here for you.